Committee of the Whole on July 24th, 2024 at 7:01 p.m. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And next is roll call. Administrator, can you help us out?
I can help you out with that. I was just receiving a phone call. Yeah, no worries. That's why I was looking at the person calling me to see if they needed my attention for something. Yeah. So I'll get to roll call, Council President. Alder Allen, you said was delayed?
He said he'll be around 7:30.
All right. Mayor Arata Frada?
Here.
Alder Dantzler?
Here.
Alder Gerhardt?
Here.
Alder Herbst is absent with excuse. Alder Jetzer?
Here.
Alder Maldonado?
Here.
Alder Vafadari? Alder Wheeler?
Here.
You've got a quorum.
Wonderful. Next item of business is the approval of minutes, the June 26, 2024 draft minutes. I will entertain a motion.
I'll move
Hey,
approval.
before we go, I don't know if Nicole told folks, but she said she did have a conflict. She was on our last call, just so if she needs to be marked excused or whatever. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks, Donald.
I'll move approval of the June 26th meeting minutes.
And is there a second?
Second.
Great. Moved by Alder Jetzer and seconded by Alder Wheeler. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes for June 26th, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Aye.
Next item is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have nobody in chambers or online for public appearances, so we can move on to our agenda items. Agenda item 6A, Dane County Regional Housing Plan with Olivia Perry. Welcome, Olivia. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. I know you are in high demand around the region for talking about the housing strategy, and you've done such great work on this for the county, so appreciate you being here tonight to talk about it with Fitchburg. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Let me see if I have to move it. Hi, everybody online. Thank you for the invitation, Mayor, President Gerhardt. Nice to see all of you. Tonight, now can you see the presentation or how do we do that? Okay, it's up there. Okay, fine. So I'm going to briefly review the purpose of the regional housing strategy, kind of why we did strategic planning, some of the key findings, priorities and strategies, and some of the next steps Fitchburg could consider, and some of the key takeaways. So overall, the purpose was to work together as a region to identify a shared vision and key housing priorities and strategies we can work on and work towards together to address the housing crisis in Dane County. We had about 80 advisory committee members, 26 sponsors, 17 municipalities, 4 mayors. We had, let me see, from Fitchburg, we had, hold on a second. We had Brad Sipple, we had Zach Billings, and I think Joyce Frey came to some of the meetings, but those were the 2 people that from Fitchburg that were on the Housing Advisory Committee. So why strategic planning? Many municipalities, including Fitchburg, have been working to address the housing crisis for a number of years in varying degrees, with varying strategies. So really the idea was to capture that momentum and build on it. And really bring different perspectives together, work to build relationships and share expertise, and try and identify the missing information and prevent duplicative efforts and leverage resources. Also, it was really important, when you're establishing sort of a regional perspective to kind of develop a shared understanding of the crisis, the past and current and future trends. And then really start to, expand on this understanding of a regional housing, housing is a regional crisis that can't be solved by one community alone, but that it's going to require more coordinated collaboration. So really starting to, work with the Housing Advisory Committee over the year to really start thinking more like a region in terms of the the housing crisis. It's very easy just to focus on your community. So how can we start thinking like a region? So the consultants asked the Housing Advisory Committee to identify their top priorities or their top areas of concern for their community, their organization, and their business. And the top four were increase the number of affordable and workforce units, that increase the number of overall housing units, increase housing near jobs and transit, and provide more pathways to home ownership. When it came time to asking the Housing Advisory Committee what their top priorities were for the Dane County region, they said reducing racial disparities in housing and home ownership, building capacity to address housing needs, build relationships and enhance partnerships and collaboration, and learn about housing issues, tools, and strategies. So I'm going to go over just some key findings tonight. I will have a number of graphs and charts and data. Don't worry about remembering it. I will share the PowerPoint with you after this. It's really just to serve as sort of a reference point so we can kind of get an idea of how we got here and where we're really at. So we started just first of all looking at establishing the planning context, reminding everybody that we're looking at Dane County, and trying to remind everybody that we're 1,200 square miles. This is 61 municipalities, and a majority of the county is rural. And that there are a lot of different perspectives and voices coming together, and so we just need to be mindful of that fact as we move forward. 81% of our county is rural, and it only has 7%, and half the population is on 7% of the land. The other is on 39% of the land, as you can see. So, and then over 70% of the rural area is actually in working farms in Dane County. So next we looked at Dane County, the change by age cohort and how we're growing and how we've been growing over the past decade. And this was very interesting for us to look at. We have a huge growth in ages 15 to 34. The number on the left is Dane County's growth, and the number on the right, 0.5%, is actually the state growth. So barely we're having any state growth in these age cohorts for the state, but the county is growing by over 23.1%, over 23% between 2010 and 2020, and these trends are continuing. We also saw that our 55 and older age cohort is growing considerably more than it is at the state level. So from 55 to 75 plus, we have a 52.7% growth rate for that 10-year period, 2010 to 2020, and the state only had 35.5%. Now, we do know as a nation we're getting older overall. We became more diverse between the time period 2010 and 2020, 5% more diversity, greater diversity in the county. The one group that did not grow, which stayed the same, was black households. It was 5% in 2010 and it was 5% in 2020. The other households did, the other ethnicities and races did grow. Employment growth. So Dane County is actually growing adding jobs twice as fast as the rest of the state, 6% compared to 6% for the state and 14% for Dane County. And we added 38,000 jobs between 2010 and 2020. This is a really interesting slide because it really shows the widening gap between jobs and residents. As you see the bottom green line, that's the total growth in households. And then the line above that, this is the green line, the households, and this is the line above that in blue, which actually is significantly greater than the actual household growth. So what you're seeing is that increased demand for housing is really contributing to a major decrease in housing inventory because of our job growth and the success of our private sector. And then to add to that sort of discrepancy, we have an underproduction of housing in Dane County from 2010 to 2020. The number of new households in Dane County was 8,000 higher than the new units that were built. So next, I'll just take a snapshot of household median income across the county. We have 226,000 households. 27% of those households in Dane County are 60% area median income or less. And 60% area median income for a family of four right now is $75,500. This is the growth in households under 30% AMI, and that grew one time 1.7 times faster than the county overall from 2010 to 2020, which is significant. This is household income by race and ethnicity, and as you can see, white households, median household income is $80,000, and it goes all the way down to Black African American households, which are at $38,000. This is the projected household growth by income. So the dark red is the household growth in each of the income categories. A majority of the household income growth is above 60% area median income. That's 77. We're going to be adding 77 households in that income, in those two income categories, 60% and above. And then we're going to see a growth of 29,000 households, 60% or below area median income.
Olivia, we have a question from Alder Dantzler. Do you want to
Yes.
jump in, Donald?
Please.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was you passed it a few slides ago, and I don't know if you're going to get to this, but I was just wondering on the slide where you showed like how many jobs were added, if you knew like what sectors those jobs were added to and what like income ranges that those jobs would fall in.
We didn't do. I think there is a breakdown of. Yes, there is a breakdown later in the report. Actually, I might be able to find it of the jobs. I don't know if we have the wage scales for that, but we do have a breakdown of the jobs later in the report. Yep. Is there anything? Did I?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm happy to share that with you after this, or send you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Send you the page numbers in the report. They can give you some more detail. Okay, so income, right? Yeah. Okay, and then we're going to move on to housing. So housing units by type in Dane County, we have 135,700 units that are in single family. 10 years ago, or a little more than 10 years ago, it was about 63% of the households were in single family. It's gone down to about 59% that are in single family. We have 89,000 in multifamily and 1,800 in mobile homes or RVs, so for a total of 226,500 housing units right now. The big squeeze was a very important, this was very important information for the Housing Advisory Committee because it really illustrated kind of what's happening in the housing market. So as you can see, all the way to the left, the 30% or below, we have the biggest gap of supply gap of housing. And this slide is actually renter housing supply, the renter housing supply gap. But you can see that there's a very significant gap in households that are affordable to folks who are 30% or below the area median income. And so what you see with these arrows is that people who are lower on the income scale and people who are higher on the income scale are competing for housing that's in the middle because there's not enough housing in their income categories. And so we call this the big squeeze. And this is the big squeeze of the renter housing supply gap. This is a really great example of why prices continue to go up and why when you're competing, so many people are competing for the same households. That can really drive up prices. And the next one is the big squeeze for single-family homes. So lower and higher income households are seeking units that are affordable at other income brackets. So everyone's competing for the same housing stock. This is the share of cost-burden households by area median income in Dane County, AMI. This is a very startling statistic. You can see that 94% of folks who are 30% AMI or below are cost-burdened or severely cost-burdened. And looking at this graph, it really makes clear that we have thousands and thousands of households in Dane County that are making choices between food and other necessities every day. And it also tells us why evictions are up. And this is cost burden by race or ethnicity. You can see cost burden is around 26% for white households, and that moves all the way up to Hispanic and Latino and Black and African American, almost 50% cost burden. That's paying 30 to 50% of your household income on household expenses. So if you're not cost burdened, you're paying 30% or less. If you're cost burdened, you're paying more than 30% of your monthly and gross income on your housing costs. This is.
I have a question, Olivia.
Yeah.
Does that include utilities and
Yes.
other expenses
Yeah.
associated with the house?
Right. For renters, it includes utilities. For homeowners, it includes mortgage insurance and mortgage and taxes.
And the recommendation is that like a person should usually spend no more than like a third of their
30%,
income.
right. That's the recommendation.
30%, okay.
Right, so that's why these, two slides are pretty startling, because they're spending so much more. And it's one thing for someone who's a, moderate income or higher income to be spending more than 30%, but when you're at such a low income level or a lower income level, you just have a lot less disposable income, so it just makes it, extremely next to impossible. So this slide is interesting because it shows the premium that developers and landlords are getting for housing built after 2010. So it's a 29% premium on a 3-bedroom unit, a rental unit, 45% premium on a 2-bedroom unit for houses built after 2010 and later. And this slide is just also a good example of what happens when, housing, so this is, the blue line is median home price to median income ratio. The orange line is the number of single-family permits per 1,000 population. And as you can see at the end there, the median is going up. At the same time, the number of permits is going down. So, and the median home price increased from $226,000 to $369,000 between 2010 and 2022, and most recently, and that's $143,000 increase in 12 years for the median home price.
Olivia, quick question for you. Sorry.
Sure, no problem.
On a previous slide where you had the premium percentages, did those numbers only go up to 2020, or are post-COVID numbers driving that percentage higher?
These, let me just remind myself of the time frame on this. This is how houses built. This is up to 2022, built 2010 or later. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Okay, we did this one. So this is just another example. Oh, I guess I did say this. Right, so for whatever reason, we can talk about that some more later, but, I'm sort of laying it out here, hopefully. Madison home prices, the Madison region home prices grew the second fastest in the nation in 2023, and more than twice the national average. Scary. So this is another graph that looks at the difference between Dane County and Wisconsin. 2012 to 2022 grew $181,000 median home price in Dane County, $95,000. So and then again, here's the premium that you're seeing for homes built after 2010. Right now, a median home price for a home built after 2010 is at $450,000. And I think it might even be higher at this point, but yeah. So I'm going to take a quick tour through housing production and the targets that the regional housing strategy lays out. As I said before, this is sort of the breakdown of what we see in our housing stock. Single-family attached units, multifamily, large multifamily, and RV and manufactured housing. So the regional housing strategy calls for an additional 139 or 140,000 units from 2010 to 2040, 64,700 new owner units, 74,000 new renter units. This is sort of the breakdown by sub-area and housing type, that map I showed you in the beginning. Madison, inner ring suburbs, outer ring suburbs, rural villages, and towns. Fitchburg is considered an inner ring suburb, in case you were wondering. So this is the senior housing inventory production goal for 2020 to 2040. That's 6,000 units. We need additional 6,000 units we need to add. And this is the breakdown a little more specifically. So we need 7,000 units a year. We're currently producing 5,000 units, and this is a 5-year average countywide. So we need to produce, as a county, at least or a minimum of 2,000 additional units a year. 3,300 of those new owner units, 3,700 new renter units, 1,765 new affordable renter units. In 2023, we built almost 900 units of affordable housing, so we have to double our affordable housing unit development, and then 300 new affordable senior units.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
That's me.
Oh,
Just last week, there was an article in the State Journal about how building construction of residential units has been dropping. that doesn't seem to be consistent with the notion that we need to create 7,000 new units a year. So how is that going to be addressed?
So housing development is kind of lumpy, right?
Yeah.
So interest rates go up. There's a pressure for developers. There's less of an incentive for developers or home buyers to buy and people to develop. So that's one issue. We had a huge surge in development. Remember when the interest rates hit rock bottom after COVID? So that is these are averages. So it's lumpy and yeah. So those are the external forces that have affected the housing market. But there are many things that as municipalities and as a county we can do to help facilitate or kind of open up that spigot, so to speak. But yes, there has been, I think, a withdrawal to some degree. And I didn't see that article, but I heard about it. I think in particular, multifamily has pulled back a little bit because of the high interest rates. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
No.
Oh.
Because the question, I know you have ideas, but what are the ideas of what we can actually do to make this to pick this up a little bit?
Yeah. Well, there's a section that's coming up. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep
Perfect.
Okay. So this is annual housing production goals 2020 to 2040. Housing, as I said before, permits fluctuates every year. These numbers are based on this allocation of the 2,000 units is based on the Capital Area Regional CARPC's development framework across cities, towns, and villages. Fitchburg has an average permitting of 360 units a year. But your target is actually adding 135 units a year, and your overall target, according to this, is 495 units. So again, you're building you're averaging a 5-year average of 360 units a year. You need to get to 495 units, so you need to add an additional 135 units a year on top of what you're currently building, and again, based on the 5-year average. So. To ensure broad participation in the regional housing strategy, we did countywide outreach that was conducted in several ways. One of the ways is we did a survey, and we got about 6,300 responses, and the full survey is in the report. But this is just some answers to some of the top questions. Should all county residents have access to housing? 96% of residents believe all Dane County residents should have access to housing, and most do not believe that housing is accessible to everyone. And then when asked, when the survey respondents were asked who's responsible for addressing the housing crisis, 82% of the respondents indicated local jurisdictions should address the housing issues, but 63% also indicated the private sector should work to address housing issues. Some of the focus group takeaways, we did 6 focus group takeaways, urban and rural, seniors, Hmong, Latinx, Black, youth, LGBTQ, who gave their input. A comment, people eligible for housing assistance often do not have access to key information about those programs. And I've actually been hearing that for years, and that is an area I think that, from my experience, municipalities can, do a bit better job, sharing information on their websites about housing and their programs, or state programs or county programs. Another observation was while housing costs are lower outside of Madison, transit is unavailable or more challenging to access, and there's less access to services. Some of the municipalities, you're very fortunate with the transit you have, but some of the municipalities, really are struggling with that, dilemma. And it does make housing less affordable when you don't have access to transit. And then discriminatory practices continue to impact people of color who are navigating the housing market. We heard that a lot during the strategic planning process. So we also, the consultants also interviewed stakeholders from developers, real estate agents, nonprofits, affordable housing developers, and rural community representatives. Comments include the Affordable Housing Development Fund that Dane County has is a game changer in attracting developers, but could support a more diverse array of projects. As you know, we've really focused on specifically on affordable housing, multifamily affordable housing. I think this year we're going to be doing a new program for folks, housing for folks who have been criminally involved in the criminal justice system. That's a very small program as part of the overall housing mix. We may be expanding it more in the budget, 2025 budget, however. So if you have thoughts about that, please share that with me or your county board supervisor or the executive or the county board chair, and let them know what your interests are in terms of, getting more access to funding. Nonprofit housing developers and builders could be intentionally prioritized to receive affordable housing funding. So there's this kind of growing idea that we should really be targeting nonprofit housing developers, affordable housing developers versus for-profit affordable housing developers. And that's something that we've been hearing. And then a construction labor shortage is preventing the adequate supply of increase, thus increasing the price of new homes. And I'll talk a little bit about that later because the county will be addressing that very specifically.
Olivia? Here.
Oh.
When you say the Affordable Housing Development Fund, and you said that was at the county level, what is the source of that funding?
GPR.
GPR?
Yeah. I'm sorry, bond financing.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I say GPR? Sorry, that's something else. But yeah, bond financing, yeah. So in order to develop the housing priorities and action items, the Housing Advisory Committee was asked to identify their core values and a vision statement. They identified the first core value was accountability. And all entities, public, private, and nonprofit alike, accept and share responsibility for providing attainable housing. The second one was affordability. All people have housing they can afford. Economic growth was the third one. Housing production keeps pace with employer growth and meets employer needs. Empowerment. Residents, practitioners, elected officials have a shared understanding of housing needs and are equipped to leverage housing resources and programs. Equity. Historically excluded populations and lower income households have access to quality housing. And then finally, sustainable development. Housing is located near existing services, infrastructure, transit, amenities, and jobs, reducing environmental impacts and improving quality of life for all residents. You won't exactly see these terms or these words embedded in the strategies, explicitly stated in the priority strategies and action items, but these were the core values that really underpinned everything, and the aspiration was to make sure that these were reflected in all areas of the strategic action plan for the next 5 years. The vision statement then was the RHS envisions an equitable and environmentally sustainable future where all residents have access to quality and affordable housing in connected neighborhoods. So with that, we'll just turn to the top 5 housing priorities of the regional housing strategy. The first one is increase the number of housing units attainable to low and moderate income households. The second, increase the number of overall housing units. The third is provide housing resources and protections for the most vulnerable populations, rehabilitate and preserve affordable of existing housing, and then provide more pathways to home ownership. So building on the housing priorities, the Housing Committee identified strategies and action items in what we call an implementation matrix. And I'm not going to go through it because it's quite extensive. We have 5 priorities, 17 strategies, and about 100 action items. But it is helpful to look at, and I would suggest you going online to looking at it, because what it does is it identifies the priority, the strategy, and the action items, and then it identifies the implementation partners. So if you can see, in the middle column, it says the lead implementation partner, or the left column says action step, and then the lead implementation partner and then support partners are identified. So it's a really helpful guide to see who's the lead, who's the partner, what's the action item, so who's the group of stakeholders that needs to be, taking on this, responsibility. And then as part of this, we also included metrics. So, for example, for the metrics for increase the number of affordable housing units for low and moderate income households, the metrics are annual funding for the public sector, annual funding from the private sector, number of new affordable units funded annually, rental versus single family. It's the job of Dane County, myself, and staff to develop an annual survey instrument that is going to be sent out to municipalities and organizations every year so we can track our progress from year to year based on these action items and everyone's efforts. And then so we can collectively look at that and see where we're moving, what direction we're moving in, what are the obstacles, why aren't we moving in this direction, or why, what's being done and what's not being done, and really take some time to evaluate that every year. So this is another example: increase the overall number of housing units, the action steps, everything from identify housing as a priority in comprehensive plans to draft model ordinances that incorporate best practices and options for a variety of zoning updates. And then, rehabilitate and preserve existing housing. As you know, older housing stock is an incredibly important part of our current affordable housing and housing stock in general. So working to preserve that is a high priority. Right. And then, provide housing resources and protections to the most vulnerable populations. And then some of the metrics we're looking at is include the number of type and new, the number, hold on a second, I'm sorry. Right, so the number of residents who might have received outreach around the type of racial equity, including training programs, number of residents who received outreach, including clerks, mailings, and pre-post outreach surveys, and the number of people of color employed in the real estate and banking industry. So these are just examples. And I'm working with there's an executive committee that meets monthly, and we're working to refine these as we move forward to make sure we're capturing all the information we want to. And then the final one is provide more pathways to home ownership. And there are a number of strategies. There's 3 strategies and probably about 15 action items associated with those strategies. And some metrics include number of first-time home buyers, number of households completing home buyer training, and number of rate of LMI or Black households that are completing home buyer training. So finally, I'm just going to turn to next steps and action items. In the following slides, I've listed the 5 priorities, highlighted a few of the top action items to pursue for Fitchburg's. Some of them you may already be doing, but you could build on, and then there are others that you can focus on going forward. So number 1, increase the number of units attainable to low and moderate income households. This is by far and away the biggest and most important housing priority we have, in addition to an overall addition of housing units. So expand or create affordable housing funds. I know the city of Fitchburg has an affordable housing fund. I think you have about 390,000, I think that, or 340,000 that you're using towards energy efficiency upgrades. And then I think you have about $7 million left after that that's available, so about $7 million that's unused, approximately. So increase the use of TIF funding to create affordable housing. So the actions are create or expand your affordable housing fund through TID extension, update your TIF policies to include affordable workforce housing benefit, and increase the number of single-family affordable housing production to 250 units a year. Currently, we are only producing countywide about 25 new affordable housing units a year, and that's Habitat for Humanity and the other nonprofits, Madison Area Community Land Trust, as well as acquisition rehab. So the Housing Advisory Committee was very insistent that we really need to expand the number of single-family units a year that are affordable. The benefits of multifamily affordable housing provides units that are a variety of income levels, including market rate and housing for seniors and supporting aging in place. I'm not sure everyone understands that when you develop an affordable housing, we put forward affordable housing development, that it's actually mixed income, and there's market rate, and there's incomes at all different levels. So it really does serve multiple purposes. And affordable single-family housing expands opportunities for first-time home buyers. So again, the annual affordable housing production goal is 1,765 for multifamily, and that's an additional at least 900 units a year. Recently, we had a TIF extension program, got all the municipalities together to talk about what they were, using their TIF extension funds on, and this is sort of a, kind of a short list of what they're using it for: new affordable housing development, multifamily and single family, preservation and rehab of older housing stock, energy efficiency upgrades, which is what you're using it for right now, tenant-supported services and resources, anti-retaliation ordinance administration, and a full-time housing and equitable development planner position, and that was in the city of Sun Prairie. So the second priority is increase the overall number of housing units. Municipalities identified the need to advance zoning reforms and update local zoning codes. So you typically would start with updating your housing chapter to create the policies and guidance for updating your zoning code. So that's the first thing that you would work on. And then plan for support and incentivize growth, including a mix of housing types in mixed-use walkable and transit-supported areas and corridors. This helps to increase housing inventory, diversify housing stock, support residents at a range of income levels, reduce pressure on housing prices, and increase sustainability or reduce car dependency. I don't know how many of you know this, but WIDA has about a $500 million housing fund program, and they will not let communities access that money until they have a residential zoning code that's been updated within the last 5 years, and a housing chapter of their comp plan that's been updated within the last 5 years. So that's a really high priority for municipalities to work on that, because getting access to that money is a win, has a lot of benefits, obviously. As I said before, 2,000 additional units needed a year. Right. So provide housing resources and protections for the most vulnerable populations. Strategy, develop or expand renter assistance programs. You can establish a rent abatement ordinance or establish a rental retaliation ordinance. And the benefit to this is lower income residents and people of color are often isolated within a community. And this can lead to disinvestment in that area, and properties can become neglected. Supporting tenants with local ordinances send a message to property managers and owners that you won't tolerate poor management and neglect, and provides tenants with legal recourse. Residents, tenants then feel supported and recognized, and it signals to them, residents, that you recognize their challenges and they feel seen and heard. And this is one of a number of things in terms of addressing racial disparities in housing and homeownership that municipalities can do. Rehabilitate and preserve affordability of existing housing. So support acquisition and rehab of affordable units with your housing funds. Increase assistance for energy efficiency, which I know you're already doing. So acquiring and maintaining, as I said before, existing housing stock is a critical part of this work, and a source of affordable workforce housing. Building new units is much more expensive than rehabilitating and preserving older housing stock. And then, of course, providing energy efficiency assistance for older single-family, multifamily units helps to reduce the environmental impacts and monthly energy costs, and helps to update older units. And provide more pathways to homeownership, increase affordable housing homeownership production. So increase funding to Habitat, Madison Community Land Trust, Wisconsin Partnership for Housing, et cetera, to create new affordable housing. Create financial incentives for developers to build units in partnership with nonprofits, which is something that I don't think we're doing here in Dane County yet, but it's a model that other regions are working on. And then host first-time homebuyer training. There's a lot of first-time homebuyer training in the city of Madison, but municipalities could, and I'm happy to work with you on this, but it would be really helpful just to, for municipalities outside the city of Madison to host those first-time homebuyer trainings, because that's really the gateway to home ownership, and really helpful. And then also helps them to qualify for Dane County's. Dane County has a number of different grant and opportunities for first-time homebuyers. So often they have to go through some sort of a training to get access to those funds. But homeownership creates the opportunity to build wealth, consistent monthly housing payments. LMI residents have access to homeownership, and older adults can downsize in their community and age in place. So again, just to review the city of Fitchburg's housing production goal, right now you're at 360. 495 is the target, and additional units needed annually is 135. So what has Dane County done? Since this has kicked off, we've hired a new housing planner. Next steps for Dane County, we hired a new housing planner, and they're going to be working with municipalities. We're going to kick off the program on August 8th to update the housing chapter of their comp plan if they're interested. They're also going to work on zoning code updates. I'm in the middle of interviewing consultants to get a best practices residential zoning code to address the housing crisis. It's going to be kind of like an evaluation checklist that municipalities can look at their code and see, see best practices and kind of evaluate and see what, areas that they need to work on or ways that they can update their code. We're working on a whole number of fact sheets. This is a huge report, and it really needs to be unpacked in many different ways. And so we're we're going to do a zoning 101. How does that affect the housing crisis, missing middle housing, so people can have an understanding of that. Affordable housing, TIF extension fund programs, et cetera. This year, in 2024, in response to this, we increased our Affordable Housing Development Fund by $5 million. And another thing that you should really be aware of is that any day now, we're going to be releasing about $2 million to Habitat for Humanity for land banking. So if you do have sites in Fitchburg that you would like to see some affordable housing, single-family affordable housing on, please reach out to Habitat for Humanity. As I said, any day now, that money is going to be made available to them, and that's for land banking, for the purchase of land outside the city of Madison. And then final just takeaways. Oh, I will say also that I am working, there are 2 other projects that we're working on, but it's been hard to kind of get them off the ground with all this other work. But I did mention, and maybe you've known about it, but for years the construction industry has had a shortage of labor. And so we are partnering with MadRep to do a maybe 2 to 3 year study inventorying, basically it's called the Construction Workforce Expansion Feasibility Study. So basically inventorying, what people are doing up and down the supply chain for labor, so the labor supply, and then interviewing sort of developers and builders and really trying to get a clearer sense of what exactly they need. Do they need, carpet layers? Do they need, framers? What do they need? And then, having sort of not unlike the strategic plan, but having a process where we actually, brainstorm together over a period of time to identify, what the leverage points are, where the investment points are, so we can work to expand that construction supply, construction workforce supply, and in particular, we're going to be looking at how can we expand it for women and people of color, because they are notoriously underrepresented in the construction industry. And finally, we're going to be doing a 3 to 5 year outreach and education campaign. Housing Advisory Committee was very clear that, people are uncomfortable with all the development that's going on, apartments going up, cranes going everywhere. So there's a big need to educate residents throughout the county. So we're working on a marketing plan that will then, kind of offer us a selection of things that we could do for the next 3 to 5 years in terms of actually doing a outreach and education campaign with an advertising firm. And we have a substantial commitment already from the Realtors Association to partner with us on that. So but we're just in the first stages of planning, coming up with a marketing plan. Who is it for? I would reach out to you and say, who do we need to reach? Where do we need to reach them? What's the media? Is it a council meeting? Is it a, Facebook? Is it, right? So anyway, that's another thing that we're working on. So finally, the RHS takeaways is, how we grow matters. These 6 core values were very important to the Housing Advisory Committee, and I encourage you to think about those and for yourself and for your community. We have to be really intentional about the housing types that we're bringing forward. Yes, we need more housing, but not just any housing. It's very specific in terms of what we need to bring forward. And then the regional housing strategy represents significant collaboration and coordination, and addressing the housing crisis will take sustained partnerships and collaboration over time. There's not a one-size-fits-all. Each community is different and has a different approach. And there is a role for everyone to play: public sector, private sector, nonprofit, and residents. And we're in this together. So please consider us a partner, and I'm happy to answer any more questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Olivia. That was really great introduction, and heard a lot of specific ideas for things that we probably need to explore. Olivia also sits on our Housing Advisory Committee, in case you guys aren't aware, and I hope that we can, I think that we will plan to kind of take a look at these pieces of these in the Housing Advisory Committee to bring more conversation back to the council for recommendations. But we can go ahead and ask some questions. Jay, you want to get started?
Yeah, so after all that, there's still not an answer about what we can do to make more of these things happen. So you pointed out Fitchburg is having roughly 360 units a year. We need to have 495. But what I see in moving forward is that we probably aren't even going to be able to maintain the 360 because we just don't have developers coming forward with these projects. So that's the question, is how do we encourage these developers to build these things. And one problem that's kind of beyond our control is we really need more condos being built. And that's just not happening anywhere right now. In fact, there are 2 condo proposals that people talked with me about in Fitchburg, and then they just disappeared. So, because of the financing requirements. So I don't know how we get past that, because that requires a change to federal law, I guess.
And I'm happy to, respond to both of those questions. So if you say developers are not coming forward, I would have to probably have a more extensive conversation with you and Mike and Joyce and to really kind of get a more detailed understanding of what that means and what that outreach looks like, if there is actual outreach, if you have the land identified. I don't know. I think your comp plan is pretty up to date.
Oh yeah, we have
Right.
land coming out the wazoo where people could build.
So then it might be easier to narrow down through a conversation. I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that because I'm not sure. Do you have an RFP out for any projects right now? No. Okay. So I mean, that's certainly a way to do that. If you want to attract if you want to attract an affordable housing development, then you say, you put out an RFP and say, we'd like to build 50 units, 100 units, 250 units in the city of Fitchburg, and then maybe you have a designated area, maybe, and then, use your affordable housing development funds to say we can provide some gap financing, Putting out an RFP will definitely attract developers. I will tell you that right now. So if you're looking for rehab, I could connect you with Project Home, who does that, all over the county. So there are lots of different ways, but it depends on, which specific housing type you're asking for, and where,
Well, I think some of the things we've needed, and I've been griping about this for years, is that it doesn't seem like these developers who even come and build the stuff they're building right now can find a way to build a house for less than $400,000, which is that's not affordable housing. That's barely housing that fits within the median income of Dane County. And I live in an apartment that costs $2,300 a month, which is fine if you're someone who's making $70,000 a year or more, but it's not so fine if you got 2 people who are working at Quick Trip or at Target or something like that, where there just isn't that much money coming in. And a lot of the newer rental units that are being built are coming in at prices like that. And I get what you're saying about rehabbing older properties, and we're going to have some opportunities to do that, I think. But there's a few drawbacks because some of those properties were built 60 years ago, so they don't have fire sprinklers in them. They don't have a lot of things that are just required now, and going and retrofitting a lot of those things is prohibitively expensive. So the question is, how do we provide? How do we make those opportunities happen? How do we get with our energy efficiency thing, I have had a couple of developers who've already called me who've submitted their applications, and they're just waiting for the approval because they think this is going to be great for them, and it probably is going to be great for them. But some of those units are also in the $1,000 a month range, which also helps the residents that we're trying to help with lower income rentals. So. But but the thing is, there's only so many of those buildings to go around, and the number of people in the less than median income in Dane County is growing. And so how do we get that to happen?
So, as we know, it's a multi-pronged effort. We do need more market rate housing, believe it or not. Market rate developers will probably come if you have the land. So. And that's single family and that's multifamily. The affordable housing, considering you have such a sizable loan fund, fund available to fund, I think that would be a high priority item, and you could put out 1, 2, 3 RFPs, or you could put out an RFP every year. I mean, I don't want to overwhelm staff, but but
Mike's got time.
But you actually have the wherewithal and the money to actually attract the affordable housing developments right now, and we're about to bring online $2 million for Habitat. There's also and we didn't really talk about this in the regional housing strategy, but there's also co-housing, and there is also cooperative housing. And I can talk about that at another time that weren't specific priorities. But the other thing that I'm encouraging communities to look at is small format housing. That's housing that's 600 to 1,000 square feet. In order to bring that forward without subsidizing it, or you could subsidize it, you really need to look at your zoning code and allow for drastically reducing your minimum residential lot size.
Our zoning code currently allows for that.
Okay, we have some other questions too, so.
Let me just get back to this.
Very
Our zoning
briefly.
code currently allows for that, and even when developers are coming in and building on 4,000 square foot lots, there's still $400,000 for a unit.
I think we should definitely have that conversation, but I want to get to some of the other questions on here. Donald, you're next, and then Julia, and then Bill.
You really spoke to it kind of with Jay's question. Just as the problems that we have, it seemed that the big squeeze issue simultaneously with rising cost of housing and construction costs, it seems to kind of exacerbate the issue of the crisis a little bit and still kind of pulls housing on the higher end or individuals that can afford it. So I was just wondering if you could speak to what would that potential solution be other than, that's why I was asking my question around individuals, where the jobs came and how much money or what income categories that we fall in, because unless there's something that I'm unaware of that allows developers or incentivizes them to build more affordable housing units, why would they? You know what I'm saying? In terms of, some of the things that have popped up in District 3 specifically, I've saw there, on the lower end, $2,300 for a one bedroom.
So you can put out an RFP for smaller homes on single family or attached homes. You can specifically say, we're looking, this is the RFP, this is the money that's attached to it, this is the place that we want it located. And I was just at a housing conference, and I'll just bring this up. One of the presentations, which is fantastic, and I'm actually going to bring them to the regional housing strategy, and I will make sure to invite you, is this whole new trend in modular housing. And modular housing is actually permitted by right in the state of Wisconsin, and it's about 20 to 25% less in cost than stick-built housing. And I do think that's a new opportunity that we all need to be taking a look at. And but I think that given the amount of funds that you do have now, it's totally within your power to design an RFP for a housing type and a number of units, that you want. To bring forward. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry. Hi.
You talking to me?
Yes.
So yes, that answer suffice. I was just kind of really just commenting and kind of piggybacking off what Jay was saying as to kind of the fiasco going here. But I know others have questions, so I'll share the floor and let them speak.
Right. And when I say, we can go into this further at the Housing Advisory Committee meeting, but, you can be specific. One car garage, no basements. You can really be specific. This is what we're looking for. And we have an emerging developer program in the state of Wisconsin, and I can imagine some of those emerging developers would be very interested in you're not going to find your, parade of home type developer coming in and answering this, RFP, but you definitely could, I definitely see that there's a lot of potential for the emerging developers to answer an RFP like this.
Julia?
Thank you, Lydia. It was great. This is my third time that I'm here in this
I
presentation.
know, I felt bad. I felt very bad. Although I gave you some new stuff at the end.
But I always learn more, I always learn something new. But the question is, first of all, I have a comment to the council. We just approved last night the capital improvement plan, and I allocate $1 million for a land banking for this reason, to be proactive if we see a parcel that we can, purchase and then work with Habitat for Humanity or another organization that we can, develop or build this more affordable housing. So, and also, I totally open to use tax incremental financing for affordable housing. So we have a tool and we know how to use it. So, but my question to you is, you mentioned about accountability. So, how often you will revise this plan and how you're going to make the implementation of the implementators' partners accountable? What is the plan? Because this is a great plan, but then, I love the goals and the strategy, but how Fitchburg, how we can be accountable,
Right. So This is going to be updated every 5 years.
Okay.
Every year, I'm going to send out a survey based on the priorities and the metrics.
Okay.
And you're going to report that information back to me, state level, county, municipalities, and then I'm going to report that back to you.
Okay.
And we're going to have an annual meeting where that gets discussed. And we're going to get feedback from you about what your obstacles are, what your needs are.
Okay.
And, we're going to be able to see, okay, well, this is the need. We only made it this far, or why is only so many people doing X? One of the things I can imagine is updating your zoning code. Sometimes people want to update the whole zoning code. That's very expensive and very time consuming. But that's has a huge opportunity to increase the number of housing units that are being delivered. So, it'll be a, case by case basis, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've read through the executive summary, and I'm glad you mentioned, the modular homes and the co-housing and the co-ops and everything, because I didn't see anything in the executive summary on the construction side. I saw an awful lot of subsidizing the buyers, but no incentive for the seller to, become more efficient. And I guess specifically, you said we've got a shortage of labor, and that would be a perfect opportunity to, get some kind of, like in Europe, they've got these, prefab walls, passive house ready, manufactured in a warehouse with, very, very efficiently, rather than a bunch of guys swinging hammers, putting up stick frames. How do we get that in the United States?
I just saw a presentation on modular housing, and we do have developers, and there's a company in Minnesota and in Wisconsin that actually does modular housing. But I'm new to that area, so I'll bring you some more information on the modular housing. But so you wanted to see more information or more actions for the individuals, the homeowners, or the people who want the housing?
If it's generally known that we've got money available for the buyers, that does not incentivize the sellers to become more efficient. And so how do we incentivize, like Jay said, it's hard to find any brand new home regardless of size. It's less than $400,000. Well, why is that? And if we incentivize them to be more efficient, to build, with less labor and more automation and greater energy efficiency, everybody comes out ahead.
Right, people are doing that. Yeah, absolutely. And you actually have an energy efficiency program that's being funded by your Affordable Housing Fund right now.
Right, to clean up, to clean up existing stock. So,
right.
So,
but you're saying going forward,
my interest would be let's build them right now, so that those
yeah.
houses 40 years from now don't need energy retrofits.
Right. And the manufacturing housing is doing that. They gave some examples of manufacturing housing that is actually coming with solar. So, yeah. And
so it sounds like this is something that we would be including in an RFP then.
Yeah, and I anticipate probably September or October where we're going to invite that panel that was at that conference to come and speak to us as a county, because I'll tell you that it was basically the Habitat for Humanity of La Crosse has in order to really reduce the prices, became a certified distributor and a certified salesperson of this manufactured housing, and then they actually got their construction director to be certified to construct it. So they really dropped the price of manufactured housing. And as you know, Habitat takes thousands of hours of volunteer hours to build, so they're reducing that as well. So it was a very interesting model. But as soon as I get that program together, I will send it out to you, because I think everyone's going to be very interested in seeing that. Did I answer your question, Bill? Kind of.
Well, it sounds like you're telling me it exists, but in practice, it hasn't existed here. And so, how do we make that happen as quickly as possible?
How do we build small, affordable, sustainable, new individual single-family homes or multifamily?
Well, I'm always going to come down more heavily on multifamily, just because
Right.
it's difficult to have a walkable community and single-family homes require roads and cars and stuff,
Right.
and that's just not the
Right.
thing.
Well, so the county does require sustainability, green Energy Star, and they get extra points for solar on their roof tops. So as part of our Affordable Housing Fund, that's been a requirement for many years now. Yep.
Okay.
Olivia, I'm curious, so, we have 8 million in the Affordable Housing Fund. We've just designated about $1 million for land banking, and we have the energy efficiency program that's rolling. What would you recommend, what should we spend that money on?
Well, I mean, I would have to have
ideas.
This is a discussion for the housing committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely a discussion for the housing committee. I mean, honestly, I'm telling everybody, we need more affordable housing. Affordable housing, which is this multifamily housing, which has energy efficiency requirements built into it, has, a wide variety of income, requirements, 30% AMI all the way up to 80% AMI and market rate. It is more efficient in terms of land, and so many things. I'm saying, and we have this huge, gap in the lowest of income levels. The sooner we fill that gap, okay, that big squeeze graph I showed you, the sooner we fill that gap, the people aren't going to be jumping over to the next one, to fight for that. So I absolutely think that affordable housing should be the #1 priority of all municipalities in Dane County. It just hits so many different, needs, income levels, aging in place, elderly housing, affordable elderly senior housing. So I would say that's the #1 thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Jim or Joe, you haven't had a chance to talk. Do you want anything to add? Joe? Anyone else have any more questions for Olivia? Bill, go ahead.
Yeah. Few words about co-housing and co-ops. I'm sure we're all familiar with single-family homes,
Right.
condos, and apartments, but not so much with the co-housing and co-ops.
Right. So co-housing is, and they're kind of slightly different models, but it's a group of housing that's typically attached in some way, shape, or form on a smaller lot. I'll talk to you, for example, about Troy Gardens, which is right near my house, or the Troy co-housing. On 5 acres, I think there's 32 or 28 homes, and there's a community space, and there are opportunities for people to make meals once a month. Everyone sort of has a commitment of sharing as part of it. The ones at Troy Gardens Co-housing, some are affordable, less than market rate, and then some are market rate. So it's a mix of housing incomes, sizes, types, and it's sort of like a built-in community. And it's a really excellent model if you're looking for creating more dense single-family homes. The Madison Area Community Land Trust owns that, as well as a number of houses around that. And we didn't talk about land trust, but I'm happy to share that. Talk to you about that. And then cooperative housing is, say you have a big 4 or 5 bedroom home, and it's typically in these older housing units. It's a number of tenants all living in the same house, sharing the house and the common space and the cleaning. And that's Madison Community Co-op has, I think, 8 buildings in the city of Madison, and these are like lifetime residents. I mean, it's just incredible. I know a number of people who've lived in them and then actually been able to save up money and bought a house. So it's a really great opportunity. But you could be single, you could be a mom and a kid, you could be a family. But that's just sort of cooperative housing, and these are both nonprofit model. Well, the Madison Area Community Land Trust is a nonprofit, and the who owns Troy Gardens and co-housing, and then the community co-op, that's also a nonprofit. And I will say that nonprofits tend to bring longer-term affordability to the table. So when you are prioritizing your housing, how to invest your housing dollars, I think it's important to remember that they're bringing, sometimes permanent affordable housing to the table, and that's something that we really value.
I guess then one more, just kind of a reminder, if we're currently at 360 units per year and we need to be at 495, that's starting this year. So the longer we don't hit 495, the higher that number 495 becomes to get us there by 2040.
Other questions? No?
And just a final comment,
Yes,
the condo question that you had. I recently received a copy of the City of Middleton's I think they put it forward as an, I'm not sure, but, when you put it forward and you all agree and you sign it in, what is it called, an ordinance? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but it's basically a statement to the federal government that says, we want Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to update their, lending rules, because those lending rules are very restrictive to, and their underwriting requirements have basically through, condominium development under the bus, back during the housing crisis. And they've slowly updated those rules, but I'm happy to share that with you if you want to be party to that, because I think other municipalities are going to be sending this, I think it's to, HUD Secretary, I can't remember, maybe it's to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, President, I'm not really sure, but that just came across my desk, and I know that this is a problem because people want condominiums. Back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, they were like, just coming, like that's all that was built and everyone was feeling overwhelmed, and now there's nothing. So it's, obviously a uncomfortable switch, but.
Would you please send us a copy of that letter?
Yeah, I agree. And Lorraine and Mike, maybe that's something we could talk about at the next Housing Advisory Committee meeting, which I think is in mid-August. Sounds like a good thing to discuss, but yeah. Great. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking more. But thank you so much for that great introduction and getting into some of the specifics with us, and hope to look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the coming years. Thanks for all your hard work on this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No, thank you. Muchas gracias.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is a jam-packed one. We've got a discussion on municipal budgeting, budget priorities, and a referendum. So where do we want to start? Misty, are you going to start? Okay.
Coming through? Excellent.
There it is.
Yes, so thank you for having me. So this is the annual going into the budget process presentation. I'll say I trimmed it down a lot because you're right, the referendum piece is on this conversation as well, which is a very important conversation. So I really am just going to hit those need to know items before we go into the budget process. If you're interested in hearing the full presentation, you could go back to FACTv and watch last year's presentation. I'm also more than happy to meet with anybody if you have specific questions or want more information about this. Always that's available too. So the budget. So why do we do a budget in the first place? And so we do the budget because this is our priority setting document where we appropriate funds. What that means to appropriate is you are actually giving the authority to staff to proceed with the items that are in the budget and actually spend that money within the purchasing guidelines. So when we're setting the budget, we're looking at what level of service do we want to provide? What does that cost? What other revenues do we have, whether that's state aid or fees or permits, all those other things. And whatever the difference is between what we want to spend and what we have in other money coming in is our property tax levy and how much we need to collect from our property owners in order to fund the city's budget. So when we set the budget, we are doing those priorities, we are appropriating the funds, and we are setting the tax levy all in one night. Looking at the 2024 budget, where did the council prioritize? So this is a graph from the budget. It's all of the levy funds in the expenditure side. I'd also like to note before we go on with these next 2 or 3 graphs, 2024 is a little bit skewed. If you remember, we had that very large transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund because we were using fund balance to fund our CIP. So that skewed the numbers by a couple of percentage points if you look at trends. But ballpark, the comment's still the same. So for the 2024 budget, just the funds that are funded by property taxes. Public safety is the largest at 38%. Debt service is 13%, and general government, which is kind of your administration functions, was at 12%. So that's the areas where we spend the most money. Looking at just the general fund, which is the main operating fund of the city, so not necessarily what the money is being spent to do, but what it's being spent on. The bulk of our budget is spent on personnel. It's not a surprise because at our heart, a city is a service provider. And in order to provide services, you need to have people to provide those services. So with the 2024 budget, we were at 66% of our budget was personnel. And then other operating was the 19%, was the second category. So by far, the largest chunk of our budget is going towards wages and benefits. The money that's coming in, again, looking just at the general fund, here in Wisconsin, we are primarily funded by property taxes, which is 64% of our budget for 2024. We do get some intergovernmental aid. It was at 16%. This includes that historic supplemental shared revenue payment that we got for the first time last year. And then we do have some other funding sources as well. But here in Wisconsin, at our level, we are very much so reliant on property taxes.
Misty?
Yep.
If I remember right, for 2024, we're collecting something in the neighborhood of $20 million in property tax levy, but the overall budget is nearly twice that. But if the property tax is 2/3, where's the gap? What am I missing?
Yep, so 2024 had a very large use of fund balance, which was another, I want to say, $3 million there. Shared revenue would have been a few million as well, too. So if you're looking at just the general fund, I don't have it in the slide deck, but there'd be a page in the budget that would break down by those categories. That's also a distinction of, are you looking at just the general fund, or are you looking at the whole city's budget? Because we have all the different funds. That might be part of the nuance there, too.
In terms of states that, how rare is it for a state for local governments to mostly be funded by property taxes? Like, is this common in other states in the country, or is this pretty unique to Wisconsin?
Yeah, so the other states I've talked to, a lot of them do have property taxes, but they're not quite as reliant on it. There's other states have income tax or sales tax as two of the other big ones. Some of them have like business taxes and things like that too. But sales and income would be the other two primary ones.
Okay.
Which here in Wisconsin, that's available at the county level and the state level, but not here at the local level. I have a whole soapbox on that if you want to hear that later.
What happens in a state like Florida where they don't have income tax at all?
So they obviously get their money from somewhere else, right? So they probably rely on property taxes also, or they might have business taxes. I don't know exactly, but you're exactly right. If you want to spend money, you got to collect it from someone. So it's just a matter of what function you use to do that. When we talk about property taxes, though, and I know you guys all know this, but I just want to make sure it's clear, even though the city is the one that's collecting those property tax bills, it's really only about 1/3 of it that actually goes to fund the city's budget. So it's an important thing to remember that there's all the other jurisdictions as well that are included on that bill. We are just about 1/3. So I would like to spend some time talking about how the budget and why we do it and how it translates to the property tax bill. And those of you that have heard this presentation before, I'm going to use my same chocolate cake because I love chocolate cake example. But some terminology first. So AV, or assessed value, this is the value that's placed on the property by the city assessor. It's a very data-driven process. They go property by property, looking at the data to determine what that value is. That's your assessed value. And that's the value that's actually the taxes are based off of, is the assessed value. We also have the equalized value. This number is set by the state. It's a very high level, all the properties thrown all together, I don't want to say arbitrary because there's a black box mechanism that they use to calculate it, but it's one big global number. It does not look property by property. It just looks kind of trends overall. And that's set by the state. And then the relationship between those two would be the assessment ratio. So last year, the city assessor chose to do a maintenance year, which means everybody's assessed value stayed the same. But I'm sure you noticed the housing market was still increasing, so the equalized value went up. And so that ratio was about 86%, between what we set property by property and those big global picture numbers and equalized value. This year we did a market update. So the assessed values were updated for everybody, and we expect our ratio to be right around 100% because we are hopefully going to be getting the market at the same date as of 1/1/24.
So essentially, the assessor goes around and decides, what each property should be worth. And then when we add all that up, compare it with the equalized value, we just multiply everybody by the same factor in order to sync up our total assessed value with the equalized value.
Exactly. Yep. Using that ratio. So how we calculate the tax bills. So this is that chocolate cake example. So the first step, of course, is setting all of our budgets. That's baking our cake, our sponge cake, getting our layers. So we have to decide what the city prioritizes and wants to spend, what other revenues we have, the difference being our property tax levy. That's our layer of the sponge cake. And then Dane County has to do the same thing, Madison College has to do the same thing, and each of the school districts has to do the same thing. And they all give me those numbers, just saying this is how much we need you, Misty, to collect for each one of our budgets, baking that cake. The next step is the TID increment. So the properties that are within a TID district pay the same property tax rate as everybody else, but the money that they pay in doesn't go to fund the city and the school and the county. It gets diverted to a TID fund in order to pay for TID project costs during the life of the district. So I think of that like the frosting. So it's more money I have to collect, but it's not money that goes to the overlying jurisdictions. And then from there, we have to figure out how much each property gets for their property tax bill, or how big of a slice of that cake that we've now built each property gets. So I have a whole cake that I need to collect, and we use the assessed value in order to decide how much of that cake each person or each property owner gets. The other question I get a lot is, so the property values, Chris Leitz, the city assessor, did send out all of those notices relatively recently, and the values did go up because the market is going up. And a question I get a lot is, does that mean then my tax bill is going to go up by the 20% or 30%, et cetera, that the value went up? And the answer there is no. It's much more nuanced than that. Because if you go back to that cake example, if my cake is the exact same size, or the example on here, it's 10 million that I need to collect in total, and my property was 300,000 last year and it went up 20%, but everybody else's went up 20% also, my piece of that cake, my share, is the exact same amount as it was before. So if everybody went up 20%, the budget stayed the same, your tax bill would be exactly the same. The nuance happens when your tax value or your property value goes up more or less than the average, or more so when that cake gets bigger. When budgets get bigger, we need to collect more money. That's the bigger point at which taxes go up. Budget constraints are important as we go into this process. So taxpayer ability and willingness to pay is always the first one I think we think about. We are getting the money from our property taxpayers. Need to make sure that that is an amount that they can afford and are willing to pay. There's also the optional expenditure restraint incentive program. I know there's been some questions about whether or not if we go to referendum, if that will impact our expenditure restraint qualification. It will not. So we were very intentional last year with the 2024 budget. We have a few $1 million in capacity sitting there. But then I also will take advantage of another strategy and amend the form, which will give us another couple $1 million of capacity. So unless you're doing a referendum that's more than what we've been talking about, qualifying for ERIP should not be a problem. There's also the newly imposed public safety maintenance of effort requirements. So this is on our police, fire, and EMS groups. Was that a question? Okay. Because we continue to invest in our public safety, I don't expect this to be a problem either going into this budget, but it is something we just need to be aware of.
That also applies to libraries, right?
No, it does not. No.
There's something about library funding that we can't cut it.
There is county requirements in order to be exempt from the county library tax.
Okay, so that's not a
yes,
state
but
thing.
Different.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And for that one, if we don't qualify, it means that our taxpayers have to pay more money to the county. So it's not necessarily something that impacts our budget, but it is something that we want to still make sure we qualify with. So the big one, of course, though, is levy limits. So I know we've talked about this a lot, so I won't go into all of the details, but the highlights being, one, it's a requirement, state statute. We don't have an option to not comply. The second is, you probably remember this teeter-totter, where levy limits, even at a 2% to 3% net new construction, which takes a lot of net new construction for us, is kind of matching what you would consider to be long-term inflation on status quo options. But then you add in additional inflationary pressures that we've seen, especially in the last couple of years, and then those additional needs that are upon us because of that new growth. That's a very off-centered teeter-totter. As of right now, we still expect our net new construction to be about 2%, probably a little bit less than that. We will find out preliminary numbers August 1st and final numbers August 15th. So we'll know soon how close we were in those estimates. Usually we're pretty close, but we'll know soon. And so then that flaw in net new construction is that you have to have new growth even to continue doing what you're already doing. It does not account for inflation or CPI or things like that of just the ongoing pressures. So I really think of that as the flaw. If I got to choose, I would say it would at least be a CPI or an inflationary factor plus net new construction. CPI would get you what you're already doing. Net new construction would be all the new needs that you have because of this new value that's coming on. But obviously I don't make the rules. So looking at our net new construction, we have had quite a few years recently where we've been above that 3% kind of average inflation. But I'll say that those years also match pretty well with what these high inflation years have been. And so in general, those years that we've had really high growth, those have increases that we've been allowed have really just gone to pay for increasing pressures on our existing services or our existing levels. We haven't been able to use much of it to actually increase the services as a result of the growth. I have some references in here if you're interested. So structural deficits. I can't imagine you thought you'd get through a presentation with me without talking about structural deficits. So I know y'all know what it is, so I won't talk about it too much, and I also know you know why they're a bad idea, so I will not dwell on that. But I do want to take a moment to talk about how great it's been that the council has been very diligent about these structural deficits and making sure that we aren't falling into that trap. So I included a couple of examples of things that we've been doing to make sure that we aren't doing structural deficits, including with the 2024 budget. We know that the hub operating costs are coming on, and so you made that very intentional decision to spend that money on one-time things so that it was available for 2025. And that was a really smart move on behalf of the council to make future budgets a little bit easier. I also point out that in our recent AAA credit rating announcement, you'd have to know I was going to mention that also, Moody's did identify that we have strong budgeting practices and proactive budget management. So our budgeting strategies is really known to be following those best practices, and I'm hopeful that council will continue to take that approach. We do have a couple of changes that are happening in the structure of the budget. One, we have new TID 18, so that's a new fund that you will see in the budget. And then on the personnel budget proposals, really wanted to focus those. Considering we're having this referendum conversation, we wanted to make sure that the only positions, new positions that were costed out and presented were the ones that were part of the referendum. So staff were only able to submit new requests for things that are in the referendum, assuming we continue this conversation over the next couple of weeks, and then also that hub custodian position that council deliberately planned for last year. So those are the only brand new positions you'll see as requests for 2025. There is a new form so that staff could still submit for 2025 ladder progressions and reclassifications. So these are things like in the building inspection department, there's a code enforcer 1, 2, and 3. When they meet certain certifications, they can progress up the ladder. Still wanted to have that as an option because it's built into our pay plan. So those were still able to be submitted. It's a very simple form to make sure that I'm including it in the budget appropriately, but those were still allowed to be submitted. But we were very careful to let the departments know that just because they can submit them, especially reclassifications, doesn't mean that they're all necessarily going to happen because we still have some pretty significant funding issues. So recognizing we really narrowed the scope for 2025, but there's still a lot more needs out there that we won't be able to even consider for a possible referendum, wanted to still keep those on the radar for all of you. So we did create a separate form so departments could submit those positions for 26 through 2029, which is year 2 through 5. We're not going to cost them out. It doesn't go into a lot of detail, but just so you kind of have them on the radar about these other things that would be helpful for city operations too. Next step, the budget process will look very similar to what it has in other years, still using primarily zero-based budgeting, continue to use most of the same forms, and the document itself will still look very similar to what you've seen. And then council adopted the schedule. These are the dates that are on there. Hopefully you have these noted, especially the October 1st and 2nd budget workshops. This is where the department heads will come in and share their requests. And then the amendments are due October 10th. The one big difference, though, about budget versus CIP is the amendment process discussion. So for CIP, we did the discussion for the amendments, the voting on the amendments, and the adoption of the CIP all at a regularly scheduled council meeting. For budget, we will do it a little bit different. We'll have the discussion on all of those amendments at the October Committee of the Whole. That can be as long of a meeting as you want. It's usually the only thing on the agenda, so that all of the discussion can happen, so you all know what information you need to know in order to make your decisions. And then when we get to the first meeting, official council meeting in November, it's very limited. So you can only speak a certain number of times. It's limited on the number of minutes we can speak. The theory of it is that you did all that discussion at the Committee of the Whole so that when we get to the council meeting, we can just be very efficient and vote on things. You know, say your piece, make your amendments to the amendments, which are still allowed, but just keep it a very streamlined version because there's often a lot more amendments at the budget time than there are at CIP. There also will still be those special procedures in order to make sure that we meet levy limits, but we can talk about that when we get there. So as you're going into budget as a council person, the 3 questions I think you should be thinking about now, rather than waiting for the mayor's proposed budget, is what are your priorities? What are new initiatives are you possibly thinking about bringing forward? And then are there any services that we're currently providing that you think are less important and could be considered for cuts or redirection to another thing? So not something that you need to answer now, but just kind of those things that you should be thinking about going into this important process, because once we start, it will move along very quickly. And that's all I have. Unless there's questions.
Jay?
As you're working on the budget, is there any space within the levy limit for additional things?
No.
Or have we run it right up to the limit?
You will see the number.
Yeah.
Chad is going to explain that.
The spoiler alert is no. There's no extra money. Yeah. And I'll say, when I first started 10 years ago now, which is crazy, we had $2 million worth of levy capacity. And last year, what were we at? Like a few $1,000s, I think. It was like $500 the year before that.
We didn't have replacement fund at that time.
That's not $2 million, though.
I know, but it makes a difference.
Okay. So with that, I will turn it over to Adam, I believe, right? Or Chad? I'll get out of your way.
Thank you, Misty. That was...
Uh-oh, here we go.
Are you okay if we jump in with questions, or should you prefer to just do the presentation and we can ask afterward?
I think I'll run through the presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion.
Sounds good.
So, yeah, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, let's try to hold our questions for the end.
It's not a lengthy presentation, so I don't anticipate that you'll have to hold your questions too long. Okay, we'll get rolling here on the update on the referendum. And as I mentioned last night at the council meeting during the announcements, our desired objective to come out of the conversation tonight, ideally, would be to identify the dollar amount that the Common Council is comfortable with. Well, back up just slightly. Assuming the council is interested in a resolution to consider a referendum, what we would like to come out of the conversation tonight is, what's the dollar amount that you would like to have on that referendum? What would you like included in that referendum? And then how, generally speaking, will the question that would appear on the ballot look, with the caveat that question would need to be fully vetted yet by Ellers and the Department of Administration or Revenue. So the referendum timeline for November, what we'd be looking at, obviously, is depending on how our conversation goes tonight, is the opportunity to either refer out a referendum resolution or do a direct referral of the resolution for the 13th of August. We are, as Misty mentioned, August 15th is the data release from the Department of Revenue that we need to ultimately finalize a resolution or referendum question. And then August 27th would be the last meeting in which the council could act on a referendum resolution if they were wanting it to appear on the November ballot, because on the 28th is the deadline for us to submit that referendum question to Dane County. Assuming we are headed to referendum for November, we would spend September up into the referendum election date doing community outreach and education on the referendum. And then, of course, November 5th would be the actual vote on that referendum. Previously discussed referendum amounts are listed here. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but generally speaking, they ranged from anywhere for $15 a month to $40 a month on the average single-family property in the city of Fitchburg. And of course, as you all are also aware, assessment notices have gone out with a change in the average single-family house, and I believe that's sitting at right around $460,000, if I recall correctly. So ultimately, we'll be finalizing these numbers based upon our conversation and then including that information in our outreach efforts. Summarizing the community survey responses that we received, we just want to present that back to the Common Council so you can see where the responses lied on a couple of different things, and as well as anybody who's watching the meeting either currently or will stream it and watch it at a later time. So you can see, based upon the survey, where particular components of a potential referendum were ranked by those completing the survey, with public safety staffing and minimum city staffing receiving the highest priority scores. Referendum support, again, this was information that was presented a couple of months ago by the survey vendors. Just again, wanted to refresh memories on where the referendum support lied. Approximately 48% of the respondents, you'll see on this slide, supported a $3.6 million referendum, and approximately 56% of respondents supported a $2.9 million referendum when looking at that. So when considering that information, it appears as though at least for those responding to the survey, somewhere between $2.9 and $3.6 million has the highest likelihood of passing. So I'm going to throw up the sample question right now. We won't talk about it yet, but I at least wanted to have you take a look at it before we walk our way through the rest of the presentation. As we go through the presentation, we'll talk about each of the things that are included in the particular question. And then also we'll be talking about some other considerations related to the operating costs. But this is, generally speaking, what the question is, at least what we're recommending at this point in time. And of course, through the conversation tonight, if the council would desire to see some modifications or changes to this question, we certainly can talk about that. We've already been in conversation with Ellers and the DOA, DOR on this question, and this question is supported by both as being a valid question at this point. So under state law, the increase in the levy of the city of Fitchburg for the tax to be imposed for the next fiscal year, 2025, is limited to currently an unknown definitive percent. That's what we're waiting for on August 15th, which will result in a levy of, obviously we'll get that information as well. And then the question specifically is, shall the city of Fitchburg be allowed to exceed this limit and increase the levy for the next fiscal year, 2025, for the purpose of funding 11 public safety positions, ongoing police department facility operating costs, improvements to the east-west transit system, 3 non-public safety positions, and other city operating costs by a total of whatever percent the referendum is identified to increase it by, which will result in obviously a change to the amount of a levy that we can levy on our property taxpayers, and on an ongoing basis include that increase for each fiscal year going forward. So that's what a question would more than likely look like on the ballot. So we'll come back to this, as I mentioned, later and talk about it in more detail, but let's work our way through a number of the items that would be included in here. So we've spent some time in the last couple of months since we presented our last update to the council, refining the numbers, adjusting for 2025 anticipated costs, working with departments on some potential modifications to previous requests and so forth. So you're going to see some things that are slightly different than what you have previously seen. But we'll be happy to talk about that, and I have others here that can answer more specific questions if need be. So what had previously been the $2.9 million option at $20 a month, when factoring in 2025 costs, as well as things like capital costs for vehicles associated with the additional positions, our new baseline recommendation here would be approximately $3.1 million or $22 a month. And what you can see that's included in this particular option, or the base option as we're referring to it as, is 3 police officers, which is a reduction of 2 from previous conversations. Those 2 police officers have been exchanged for 1 shift-based police lieutenant and 1 sergeant that would be responsible for overseeing investigations. The change to that position has been made based upon an assessment and evaluation by our police department about their most pressing needs and trying to address multiple needs through this referendum instead of focusing solely on one particular need. The change was also discussed with Mayor Arata Frada and as well as city administration. 6 firefighters, an increase in the paid on-call firefighter rate to at least a minimum of $15 an hour. A communication director position. We all are familiar with the conversation that's been ongoing in regards to the city's communication and outreach efforts, and having the training, expertise, and capacity to further enhance that. Also looking at an HR generalist / business partner position and a finance manager position. Those 3 positions in particular were all identified in the Baker Tilly organizational study. That's why we focused, where we focused our recommendation on this base option is what was recommended in the Baker Tilly study. When we look at this finance manager position, we feel that that is truly within the spirit of what the recommendation of Baker Tilly had in regards to the 2 positions that they had recommended in the finance department. We certainly need a position that's going to provide additional capacity in the finance department based upon the growing community, the number of transactions that are being processed, the number of on-base items that are working through the system, through payments and purchasing requests and so forth. And so in addition to building that capacity within the finance department, we think this will also help our finance director focus on more higher level duties and create potential career ladders within the finance department. And then also 2 other considerations with this position is This role will have heavy liaison responsibility with our Public Works Department and really working closely with them, particularly on large projects such as road projects, reconstruction things, facilities, and so forth, to help facilitate a more efficient interaction between our Public Works Department and our Finance Department, and really also to reduce the burden of some of the financial responsibilities and reporting requirements that our engineers are tasked with as they're working on these larger projects. So we're trying to utilize this position to also address a secondary need there to free up some of our engineers' time. And then this position would also enhance our succession planning in the Finance Department. That's been already identified, as you've seen through our recent workshop, with the strategic plan of one of the things that the city may need to be focusing on its efforts. And then, of course, we've been talking about transit improvements and police department facility operating costs throughout this entire process. So when you look at this, this is what we are referring to again as the base option at this point. Other considerations that have come up since our last update that we think are important for the council to be aware of and consider as you determine what the final number will be for a referendum. Misty's already provided the spoiler alert on what the 2025 budget looks like, and here's a brief slide that really kind of highlights what that is. We're looking at approximately $478,000 in net new construction, which would allow us to increase our levy by that amount. There is an asterisk by that. As we've stated, the DOR will provide the final number in August, but we're not anticipating that it's going to be significantly different than that. Our health insurance rates have already been identified for 2025. The increase on those rates is approximately 8.5%. which equates to an additional $268,000 in cost to the city for its health insurance program. And the Wisconsin Retirement System has also identified what the rate increases are for next year, which is going to increase the city's cost by just over $57,000. That leaves us with approximately $167,000 in remaining levy limit capacity. And I will add that this is irregardless of an evaluation at this point in time of what the budget worksheets have been submitted by our departments for other operating expenses. Those were all submitted yesterday was the deadline for those. Obviously, Misty and I will begin working our way through them and ultimately get them over to Mayor Arata for consideration of our operating budget. But even assuming a 0% or relatively flat increase, ideally, our remaining capacity, as I mentioned, is $167,000. A 1% cost of living adjustment for city employees is approximately $200,000. So we are already running about a $35,000 deficit in our ability to provide a 1% cost of living increase for city employees. I think that that's something that the council is going to want to consider as it takes a look at what its final dollar amount might be, or what is contained within the dollar amount in which you feel comfortable presenting to the voters. I think in an ideal world, we'd be looking at an approximate 3% COLA increase, again, trying to maintain what the inflationary pressures have been. So if that were the case, obviously we'd be looking at an approximately another $400,000 in levy capacity needing to be created in order to provide a 3% cost of living increase to our employees next year. The other item that has recently developed since our last update, and I sent an email to the Common Council, I think it's been a few weeks ago at this point in time, and this was recently discussed on Monday evening at the Verona Common Council meeting, the City of Verona Common Council meeting, is there's been some discussion that's come up in the last several months about long-term EMS service provision to both cities and what that might look like. We're quite confident that there is going to be a request. In fact, there was a request already this afternoon to update the intergovernmental agreement that forms the funding formula for the EMS district. The main issue that's been presented is that Fitchburg has approximately 2/3 of the calls for service, but pays just over 55% for the service as a whole, and that may not be completely equitable to the other communities. So we are anticipating that if there is a change in the intergovernmental agreement, our costs are likely going to go up, probably as much as $225,000 for that service. And ultimately, if there is a long-term decision that's made on EMS service position that would perhaps transition to an option or options such as a joint fire and EMS district or city-led fire and EMS services, we're anticipating that our operating costs will actually increase more than the $225,000 that are anticipated there. And we'll have further conversations about this likely at the August 27th council meeting. But I at least wanted to get this on your radar that there are some very significant funding things that are on the horizon here that may need to be considered as we're talking referendum, just to maintain existing services that we have here, and obviously continue to maintain our recruitment and retention efforts that have overall been quite positive the last few years. So if we want to potentially talk about, and I'll go back one more slide and look at, what we would consider these items to be would be operating costs, which you saw in the question. When we go back and take a look at that option that put us just near $3.6 million, which was one of the amounts in the survey, and currently would trend at about $25 per month on the average Fitchburg property. You can see what we have here. The top bullet points don't change. The only thing that's added in there is operating costs, and that would provide us with approximately $475,000 in additional operating capacity to maintain, ideally, existing services and or provide a COLA of up to 3% for employees. So again, these things have all changed considerably on a couple of fronts in the last month or so. We had the fortunate change from the state in regards to its health insurance rates. Typically, those have historically come out in mid-September. We wouldn't have had any idea exactly what that increase would have been for another 2 months, but they've changed at least the release date for this year, and it was released in mid-July. So that was very helpful information for us to have at this point, and then it allowed us to at least put some, more refined preliminary estimates together for this conversation tonight, and really kind of paint a picture of what we're looking at financially with the city in 2025. So looking at this, I think, where we're at right now is it's an appropriate opportunity to now start talking about what do you think the dollar amount you'd like to see, assuming we're still on the path for referendum, and what would you like to see in that referendum?
Question from the mayor.
I have a question. In this one, the 25 per month, the $475,000 increase in operating cost, does include that 3% COLA?
That would allow us to do approximately 3% COLA with about $400,000 of that and leave approximately $75,000 in remaining operating capacity that at this point in time I would recommend being reserved for whatever may come out of the EMS conversation.
We are going to be short because we need 225.
Well, we do have the ability to utilize the levy limit exemption that's afforded for EMS districts. So we may have some ability to help with that to a certain extent, but we're also talking about, what future outcomes may be as this conversation likely evolves over the next several months.
Jay?
Well, there's obviously a lot of questions about this. If we do this referendum this year and we have money available to do a 3% cost of living increase, what happens in 2026? Where it seems like going about this and the way we're going about it is just creating dominoes to fall that, I don't want to do a referendum every year.
Nor do we.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know what the answer is. And, from the beginning, I've had questions about that $350,000 transit number because I don't think any kind of meaningful improvement can be done for $350,000. I think that's just astoundingly low. Like even if we were talking about adding an east-west connector, I don't see that in the cards. Have we gotten anything from Metro about what they would anticipate for possible costs?
Yeah, that number came directly from Metro, and I can, Scott or Chad, if you want to kill my screen here, I can try to find exactly what that service increase would be. I don't want to give you bad information, and I can't remember it directly off the top of my head, but it is enhancements to the current Metro Route 65, which runs basically from City Hall back to the northeast through Fitchburg Center, East Sherrill, Uptown, Terra Vesa, and Southdale. And then the 75, which basically runs from Fish Hatchery Road to McKee Road, to the western border of the city. And what we would be looking at is 7-day-a-week service, and I gotta determine what we have currently.
I believe it's like peak hour work.
It's peak hours
For work
only
days.
on weekdays,
Yeah.
correct, which is generally like roughly 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. is generally what it is. So what we would do, what we can do according to Madison Metro with approximately $350,000 in 2025 dollars is, and we went through several different iterations of what could be possible, and this is the best option that provides 7-day-a-week service on the 65 and 75, and both of those would ultimately connect at a common point, which is likely to be the southernmost BRT stop in the city of Fitchburg. So ultimately both the 75 and 65 would connect to BRT and then go in an easterly and a westerly direction and include City Hall, the city campus in the east route with the 65. It'd be 7 days a week service with Mondays through Fridays being 45 minutes during the daytime, and then the evenings and weekends would have 90-minute service. We recognize that is probably not the ultimate ideal for that service at this point in time, but it's certainly a significant enhancement to what we have currently when we do not have any service running during the midday or evenings, nor service at all on the weekends. And just by way of example, if we were to look at 45-minute service, 7 days per week on the 65 and 75, we'd be looking at roughly $475,000 to do that. So that's where the $350,000 number came in as approximately the best kind of striking of a balance of notably enhancing the service, but not necessarily costing a significant amount.
Do we have any idea, like if you lived in Southdale and you wanted to go to Target or Hy-Vee, how long that total bus ride would be?
I don't, off the top of my head, and this was a conversation with Metro. Southdale is also served by, I think, is it Route D as well? So they actually may have a couple of options if they want to head to the west, where in some situations it may be quicker for them to take the Route D to a BRT connection and then run BRT down Fish Hatch and out on the 75. Obviously, there's a couple of connections in there versus getting on the 65 and connecting at the BRT stop and then riding the 75. I don't have that information. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit of time.
Well, this is obviously relying on the notion that we're going to have a BRT stop somewhere down here in this civic campus area.
Actually, it's
we don't
really
know.
relying on a BRT stop at Fish and McKee.
Oh, that's where it's, that's where the connection
That's where
would
we're
be.
planning the terminating point at the south end of the BRT at this point in time, largely because, we're talking another $300,000 to $350,000 in annual operating costs to bring BRT down to city campus from McKee Road, plus approximately, I think, don't quote me on this, I want to say it's almost $5 million in capital costs as well at this point.
Well, that's also even the BRT coming down to Fish Hatch and PD is not. That's like 2027 or 2028.
No, but they can extend the Route B down to that stop basically immediately if they wanted to, if we threw in a little bit of extra money.
We added last night in the CIP a couple of $1 million for, I think, 2030.
Yeah,
If we
somewhere
want
in
to do
there.
an extension.
Right,
Right.
for potential expansion.
Yeah.
But
The other-
We're
regardless,
getting BRT,
Yeah.
basically BRT level frequency right now on the Route B coming down Fish Hatchery Road.
regardless of that, though, my broader point is I don't think $350,000 is enough for that line item, even though it came from Metro. I've been around long enough to know how these things go, and we'll probably have to construct some stops, which will probably be a capital improvement project number, but there's just going to be other expenses that are going to come into play here. So I would feel more comfortable increasing that number.
And that's also $2025. So again, costs will go up over time. And Chad, was there discussion at that time about extending the existing Route B instead of the southernmost point being in Cahill, Maine, coming down to where the BRT route's going to be on Treverton Pike?
Not yet, no.
I think we should,
We should
this is probably already,
that one is very granular.
this is probably already being discussed, but we should talk about that at TTC. I wonder if Metro could walk us through it so that there's actually a really detailed presentation about what that could look like.
Question.
Yeah, I think that would be fair. I think the question would be is,
Do we need to decide tonight?
do you wait until a referendum has been passed to fully understand where that money would go?
Oh, but I was thinking in the August.
Oh, yeah.
TTC meeting,
You're
if
welcome
possible,
to do
so
that.
that-
We can certainly work with them to talk about what the service might look like at
Yeah,
this $350,000.
Just so we have a full picture of that here.
My question is maybe to Misty, because it's more like, if we add the 3% adjustment of COLA on ongoing operating cost, okay? So it means that every year we are going to be able to increase that because we are asking that in the language. I want to understand that. I am correct what I'm saying or no?
So if I'm following your question.
Because this is an ongoing, this is an operating ongoing cost. So it
Correct.
means that we are going to have the flexibility that if they approve the referendum, they are going to allow us to have that 3% increase.
That increase would be available for cost of living in 2025, depending on what
Only
the percentage
25.
is. It would carry on through remaining years because it's an ongoing request, but it would
Okay,
already
right.
be obligated in 2025, and therefore any future increases to cost of living would need to be accounted for.
Oh, but any additional increase, more than 3%, they were talking.
Above 3% in 2025 or every year beyond that.
No, yeah, I get it. But if we keep it at 3, like we have been always, it's not ideal, but you know what I mean. So.
I guess I'm not following this. The referendum amount would be fixed, right? It would not increase each year to allow us to continue that 3% increase, which is going to get larger each year.
We would fall back, and Alder Allen's already pointed this out, on the levy to continue to fund any subsequent COLAs.
This is when we need to build more houses.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a fixed dollar amount in perpetuity, or whatever. I'm going to look over at Misty when I say it's essentially a structural deficit that we're getting ourselves into. If we say that we're going to fund these positions, that only works if nobody ever gets a raise and costs never go up. So after the first year, we're going to lose basically $95,000 worth of buying power with this $3.1 million if inflation is only 3%.
Well, I suppose every year you could look at that, why we don't fit the strict definition of a structural deficit. Every year we got to build the budget based on what our levy is, right? And, you know, we're not guaranteed in any given year to have the same amount of levy capacity available, or I'm sorry, more levy capacity available to meet even our current service delivery. So, I mean, there are certainly a year where, you know, take for instance, we don't have a referendum this year or ever, you know, you take a look at, you pass an operating budget for 2025 based on what you have available in 2025 through the levy and the net new construction, and you have, you know, 0.5% on a net new construction, you're looking at a cut of services or a cut of staff.
Yeah.
Because you don't have money, regardless.
Yeah.
Even though you had it in your operating budget and you technically did not have a structural deficit.
It's a risk that we are taking.
Yeah.
So-
my point is, you know, we can fund this for the first year and there's no guarantee after that.
Correct. There may be some flexibility in 26. For instance, there could be a conversation about what to do with the police facility operating costs. I mean, obviously, you don't want to obligate that for something else, but there will be, you know, and we've looked at these positions, for instance, that are proposed to be hired. Those are at like the midpoint of where they fall in the salary. They're not entry-level cost. You know, anticipating that, for instance, with the police officers, they could be hired as laterals. So they could start at a potentially higher rate. If for whatever reason they don't, they come in at an entry-level rate, then there could be a little bit of a small pocket of money there. You know, but the bottom line is, I think that's why we're having this conversation now, is that the operating side of things have changed significantly from our prior conversations as these numbers have come in. And this is probably our opportunity to try to address that as far as we feel we can reasonably address that into the future. And Alder Allen is also correct that we don't want to do a referendum every year, but even if one is passed at, say, $4 million, we're back at this conversation in 3 to 5 years.
Or, well, we have other options.
There could be other options
We
that
have
could be
other options.
explored.
The state changes.
Of course.
We can stop growing. We decide not to delay stuff. We can cut services. We can, you know, there are other options.
There are. I mean, I would caution the stopping of growth, since as we've heard in Misty's presentation, we need growth just to maintain existing services.
No, I know. But,
So-
you know, there are, yeah.
Right.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of risk regardless. I'm glad you brought up the operating costs. That was always over
Yeah.
in the back of my mind. It's like, oh yeah, well, the operating cost is a key problem that we're facing with levy limits, and it's not being addressed with the previous conversation. So I'm glad you brought it up. I am a very strong advocate of public transit, but I do have concerns about transit as a part of the question, because I worry that there's less support for that. And yeah, I don't know. I worry about that aspect of it. And I particularly don't like how it's worded in the question. I think improvements to east-west transit is
Well, we
is
can change
weird.
that.
I think it should be something like improvements to public transit
Yeah, we can
or
change
something like that.
Yeah,
more
we can
general,
certainly look
Yeah.
at that as we get into the question later.
if we're going to keep it. But the problem with public transit is, like, until you expand it, it's like a chicken and the egg thing. It's like you have to expand it, otherwise people aren't going to use it, and you can't encourage more dense growth that people rely on public transit if you don't have the expansion of the service. So, and there's some values in creating a 7-day-a-week service. I believe that opens up paratransit to all the people on those routes, all
Within a
across the
half
city,
mile of the route.
which does not exist on those routes currently, which is a huge service to a lot of people in the region, and is significant. So, so anyway, I guess that is all to say that I think I lean towards the 3.6 million figure. I know it's like technically higher than what the survey recommended, but I do recall from the survey conversation that 48% supported 3.6 million, but the percentage of renters was very low in the survey results. It was like, I don't know, it was something like 15 or 18% of the survey respondents, if I remember correctly. And renters are 50% of the population. So, and they supported the referendum at a higher level than homeowners. So my guess is that if you actually did a representative sample of renters versus homeowners, you might actually be looking at a 50% support for that level of funding, which is what makes me more comfortable with the higher figure. I'm fairly comfortable with the list of positions that you've laid out. We've had lots of conversations. So I think and I would prefer to have more room for operating costs. So I prefer the 3.6 million option.
Have we gotten any official recommendation from our consultant regarding what their confidence level is at each dollar amount?
It's there.
They were they shared that information during their presentation several months back, and admittedly, my recollection is they said obviously the closer you get to 3.6 million, the less their confidence goes, or the more their confidence goes down. But you can see in the slide that of the respondents, 48% supported 3.6 million or higher, actually, and 56% supported 2.9 million.
Right, but like Alder Gerhardt says, these numbers are not normalized. And I remember Miller saying that they have their number where they can say we're 90% sure this will pass, and I don't know that we've heard what that number is from them, have we?
I think it was 2.9.
Well, they were confident, relatively confident that 2.9 will pass based upon what they saw here, and their own statement is that the likelihood changes between 2.9 and 3.6, and the range is somewhere, the range of confidence is somewhere probably between the two of them.
Okay.
And to Alder Gerhardt's point, you can see where the support rested between renters and homeowners as well in the top two charts or graphs.
Any other thoughts from the council about the amount?
I think we need to have a consensus with the council for the amount. So
Yeah.
everyone should say.
Do people have a preference for one of the two options presented tonight or a different option?
I guess I guess I would really like to hear Miller's perspective. If we say, let's go for 3.6, and they say, well...
They already told us the number is between 2.9 and 3.5.
Well, I understand that, but I don't know what their confidence level is at 3.6 versus 2.9.
I think it's still just a guess. Right? It's all...
I think there was a discussion about that at the committee of the whole, in which their council meeting, whichever one it was, that they presented their findings, and that's Community Perceptions is the survey company that provided that. I mean, if you want, we can dig that up and certainly send the link out. I know it doesn't help for this evening.
I mean,
but
it sounded like the confidence interval was that 2.9 to 3.5 within the 95%. So somewhere within there would be the true value of whatever the voter would pass between that number. So I didn't think it shifted from the 2.9 to the 3.5. It was the way I interpret what they said. Is that correct? What other people heard?
Yeah, my notes said that basically what they said was the closer to 2.9, it's the safer bet because they try to assume that no undecideds breaks towards yes. And if that's true, then 2.9 would pass and anything above that wouldn't pass.
Yeah,
but they're making the most conservative assumption.
I think the guy was very, like when I tried to press on that question, he was like, we're confident that 2.9 will pass. And, I still think we should be going for a much larger amount, but I don't think there's support on the council for that. So I support the largest possible number that the council will support.
which currently on the table is 3.6 million offered by Alder Gerhardt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to strike a balance between what voters will ultimately support and what will not bring us back here for a referendum in the near future. So I'm leaning more towards the 3.6, and I'm confident if we had the right wording that we could make it pass.
What did the Madison School District settle on?
600.
So they're doing a $600 million referendum.
Yeah, roughly 100 in operating cost and roughly 500 million in capital cost,
Right,
which, if I recall correctly, was about a $1,300 property increase on the average single-family home in the city of Madison.
So 59% of our household in Fitchburg, including myself and Jim, Gabriela, and Bill, and we are under that. We are going to see two questions, you know what I mean? And 600 is going to be there, and then 3.6, and I will say, oh.
Yeah, approximately 40 to 45% of our households are in the Madison School District.
Speaking of that, since we didn't get back to the actual question yet, I do think we should put something, like, if we're going to go with this, then we should put something in there that says this will be $25 a month on the average, 300 and however many $1,000 for the average Fitchburg home.
Oh, can we add that to the
I don't
question?
think we're able to add that information into the question, and we also have to be concerned about the length of the question, but that will certainly be a point that will be emphasized during the outreach and all of the information that will be shared with residents, including, I think doesn't the contract include, is it 2 direct mailers? 2, 3? So
Yeah, I thought
at least
there
2
were-
direct
I thought
mailers
there were
to addresses within the city.
So the question will have the increase in taxes, for sure. And one of the, if you bring back, I want to be sure what those numbers are going to be, the excess. You know,
We won't know yet. We won't know
but
yet.
we have an example. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
I think right now the example that you could probably use that will be roughly close to it is something along the lines of the first taxes would be, say, 3.5 or 4% for a total levy of, like, say, 32 million. And then the next taxes would come down to probably something along the lines, if you go to 3.6 million, of 10 or 11% for a total levy of, say, 35.5 million, 35.6 million by the time you add in the 3.6 million.
Okay.
So that's generally what those X's will end
Okay.
up having in them, roughly speaking.
Sound a
Don't
lot.
quote me
People
on
that
the exact numbers, but that's probably something that.
So,
it would
but this
look
is we need to use that language.
Yes, we need to use that language.
Oh my God.
And people are going to read that, limited to 3 point whatever percent and assume that their taxes are going up by 3 point whatever percent, but that's not true because we've got more people now.
I don't know. People are pretty used to referendums at this point. I mean, I think all of us have voted on at least one in the last couple of years. They pass. I mean, like, I'm not saying it's not hard to pass them. I'm just saying that people do.
There have been, I
do
think, in the
pass.
last 5 years, there's all 3 school districts have gone to referendum. I think Madison was the most recent one was 2020 or 2019. Obviously, they're heading back again this year. And then Oregon and Verona school districts both did one last year.
I guess I appreciate the conversation because I agree that it's a concern, but like I think the question has to be, do we think we need to go to referendum because this is what we need, and we have to just trust that the voters will make the best decision they have with all the education that our contractor will provide, and just go with it. Like we can't, like, you can't predict the psychology of people. You just have to trust that our voters are going to educate themselves, and if they vote no, they vote no.
We need to educate them.
Well,
Mariela.
absolutely. We're going to pay to educate them, but it's just like, I feel like, trying to decide what the psychology of it is, I feel like it's impossible. I think we just need to decide, do we want to pose the question to them and let the voters make the decision and do their best to educate them in the lead up to that decision? I think that's all we can do.
That sounds an awful lot like what I was saying earlier this year, is we need to trust our ability to sell this to the voters. Mm-hmm. And we need to do a darn good job of it.
Jim, how do you feel about 3.6?
I'm a little concerned. I mean, with the school district, those are big numbers. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be sophisticated enough to break that down, that it's only going to be a small amount that's going to add to their tax bill per month. I mean, they're going to be looking at big numbers. So I don't know at this point, but I am concerned. And like you said, Gabriella, the transportation part, I'm not too sure about that, because when I go to Pick and Save and look at these buses, at least here, they're not very full, and I don't see many people on Fish Hatchery Road. I mean, I know it has to go up Fish Hatchery Road, but, we get a lot of feedback that nobody's riding the buses, and then we're going to put a few $100,000 into transportation. I don't know if people are going to look at that and just, for that reason, kind of reject the referendum. So I've still got a lot of questions. I'm still thinking.
Well, I don't think, I mean, presumably our educational campaign is going to deal with this, so people will see that the transit number is a relatively small portion of this. Presumably we're going to do that. And I mean, I've kind of lost a lot of confidence in Mueller Communications to communicate things properly, but presumably that's what we're going to be presenting, so people will know that it's just not a big part of this.
Well, and clearly from the outreach and communication standpoint, obviously Mueller will be helping facilitate that and coordinating a lot of things and providing information behind the scenes, so to speak. But really that's going to be, a lot of that's going to be done, at least on the public front, with the listening sessions or information sessions that are going to be proposed for in-person and online or virtual. That'll be city staff, and ideally most, if not all, of you are in attendance at those, so that collectively we are able to educate our voters on what is in the referendum, why it's there, and what the outcome will be, depending on what the referendum vote yields.
My concern is, this is what, if we are doing this, and when we do this listening session, all of us, we need to be present, we need to participate, we need to attend. And for any reason, one of us decided that we are going to vote no for this. My concern is the noise that those people can do and affect the referendum too. Because if we're doing, we decide to say yes, we need to be, we have to have only one voice here, okay? And try to support this initiative. And be active in the next couple of months to, get educated through Mueller about what is the message that we need to present to the resident, how to do it, participate in the listening session. We have to do our part too in this process if we want this to be successful too. This is how I see it.
And just for reference, I double-checked my math. $25 a month equates to $300 annually. And again, the average single-family house.
Average, yeah.
It's a lot of value.
But we don't live in an average house.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is people just don't understand how much their property taxes come from the city. I think that's the biggest issue that we face, is that people think that their entire tax bill, some people think that the entire tax bill is the city of Fitchburg's bill, and it's not.
And
they don't see that ours has been static.
Yeah.
That our percentage has been static for years because they don't see the breakdown in a way that they need. So they think that our taxes have been going up when they've been static. And so that's the piece of education that I'm most concerned about. And it's not anyone's fault for not knowing that. It's confusing. It's confusing for me, and I think about this all the time. So,
well, you got to add other things to think about.
Yeah.
Because this will drive you nuts.
But also, the other concern is with the revaluation that happened this year is also, I don't think that the revaluation is helping to the message either, because they think, they're going to apply that amount over my revaluation. People think that.
Well, that'll actually be helpful that there was a revaluation year. I know that in some regards it could be problematic, but we'll be able to use actual numbers when we do the community outreach. She'll be able to say, this is now what the updated average home value is based upon the revaluation that was done this year. And then obviously when we have the final numbers from the DOR, we'll be able to better articulate truly what the tax impact is. We think we're pretty close right now with obviously what we've put together as estimates. Hopefully there's not a curveball tossed at us, but we'll at least be able to use real information and avoid potential confusion with using last year's revaluation and those sorts of things.
So I guess I'll just again reiterate what I threw on the table before. I would be comfortable with this option that's being presented, forming a question at that amount and potentially with questioning the transit portion of the question, I think.
So what is your question? Is it you are thinking to remove the transit?
I don't know. At minimum, change the.
No, because
but
we need. This is the opportunity to discuss, or maybe because they need to know that.
I don't know. I mean, I would consider it. I don't like it, but because I think it's important, and I think the paratransit alone is a reason to expand the fixed routes. But I don't know. It's just like it's a hard choice because it's important for it to pass. It's all important.
I don't think the transit is going to sink this question. If this question is going to sink, it's going to be because it's $300 a year that people don't want to pay. I mean, when people look at the question, even as it's listed, it's talking about the number of public safety positions that we're adding. It's talking about the police department operating costs. It's talking about the east-west transit, and then it talks about 3 more positions that we want to add. So I mean, I just can't imagine under any scenario under which the transit sinks this question.
Joe has a question.
Yeah, I would agree with Jay on this one. I'm also wondering what role that order of items being listed impacts voter confidence. Is this something we've discussed with the consultant, or is this something folks have experience on, like what appears first influences how people vote or perceive it? Because transit is all the way at the bottom of that question.
Well, actually, transit, just by way of clarification, is third from the bottom with the non-public safety positions and city operating costs following after it. I don't think it necessarily matters per se which order the council would like them to appear in. If I recall correctly from the conversation that we had at a previous meeting in which Miller Communications was present, their experience with I think they're pushing a couple of dozen referendums that they've been a part of now, that generally speaking, they see the public safety support tends to be strong correlation to a successful referendum. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the items can be worded in whatever order you would like.
Can we, instead of saying police department facility, can we say police service facility?
Sure.
Okay.
And Alder Gerhardt, you mentioned, since we're kind of transitioning a little bit here to the question, we might as well just run with it. You're thinking improvements to public transit system?
Yeah, but those are just operating costs. Is there a reason why the public transit is specifically called out?
Well, we were trying to strike a balance of being transparent with what the intended uses are, but still maintaining flexibility for the city. I mean, quite honestly, we could put every single one of these as an operating cost. We could say 3.6 million for operating costs if we wanted to, but we obviously would be concerned that would be, for folks who may not have had the time to be informed, they would be like, well, what's it going for? I'm not willing to support it. So at least this tries to strike that balance of identifying where the money's headed, but also providing some flexibility for the city.
Yeah, I would say improvements to public transit would, an initial proposal. I don't know if that's the best wording, but.
And I don't like the word facility. Can we say building?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know.
I think I would want to break out the police department and the fire department positions. So instead of saying funding 11 public safety positions, let's just say we've got five police positions and 6 fire department positions and 3 non-public safety positions. I would put the new positions, just group them all together at the beginning of this.
Yeah, I don't think we have any concern about that. Obviously, we're trying to be cognizant of the length of the question, but I don't think that
Do you have a
drastically
limit
changes.
for how many words? You
There
need
is
to?
actually a character limit. I
know, this is
I don't
what I
think we're
asked.
hitting it
Okay.
yet, but just as a matter
Okay.
of reference, I think there is some measure of limit. Plus, we want to make sure we keep people's attention with the question as well. We don't want a one-page question.
Well, in English class, this is what we call a run-on sentence. I mean, that whole thing that you have on the screen right now is one sentence.
Sentence diagram, that one would be
Yeah.
fun.
That's fair. So to Alder Allen's suggestion, then we would indicate 5 police positions, 6 fire department or fire positions, and then move the non-public safety positions to follow that? Is that what your suggestion was, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we not call them non-public safety? Because non-public is dashed, and so people might think it refers to private safety positions.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah,
we could say administrative positions,
Yeah.
but that might
Or-
not be the best. We could say general positions. What are they again? There's the communications.
The communications
person,
director, the
finance person.
finance manager, and the HR position.
And the HR person.
Yeah. I mean, we could put general. I mean, I think that could be potentially an option if that's what the council would like.
Yeah, I think non-public safety is just an awkward wording.
You'd prefer general?
General city.
I think so.
General what?
General city?
General city
General
government.
General
or-
city staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe with general city staff or general city
Or just
positions.
General-
three additional city staff positions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
3 additional
that's
city
fine.
staff. General,
Yeah.
Administrative?
General makes it sound like we don't know what they're going to do.
Generalists. 3 additional city staff positions, is that what we
Yes.
said?
There you go. And obviously, the whole point of the communication and outreach is to get that information truly in front of our voters so that they ideally have the answer to this question before they hit the ballot box in the vast majority of situations, if we're lucky.
So can you go back to the schedule again?
This one?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you know from my continued griping about it, I really hate these direct referred things that we do.
yeah, but we're running against
But
time.
but the problem is between August 13th and August 28th, there's not a lot of our committees that are going to have a chance to weigh in on this. But I guess I would like some of our committees. I'd like transportation and transit to have a recommendation on it.
No. This is our decision.
Well, TTC meets next on August 12th, I think.
August 8th.
August 8th. So it potentially could be in the lead up to, like, we could discuss that, what the Metro had presented as the $350,000 improvement.
While you're right that this is a council decision, it's also important to have as many people involved in this as possible because some of those committee members are going to be our ambassadors out there in the community too. Because when someone says, hey, what's this transit thing, to someone who's on our Transportation and Transit Commission, if they have no idea, if they aren't willing to make the case, if they don't know, then it's not going to do us any good.
But maybe maybe the elders that are in those committees can share with them what we are trying to do.
Sure, but they may not know the alders. I mean, there's a lot of people who live in this city who have no idea who we
No,
are.
I'm talking about the commission, the TTC. Maybe Gabriel and Bill can explain in the next, this is what we are.
That's fine, but I'd like to have those committees weigh in on this before.
It just
we
doesn't have
get
to be
too far
referred
away.
out for I just don't think it has to be referred out to them for them to weigh in.
No,
Like, I think
no,
it can be
it
as
doesn't.
in the agenda.
Yeah.
And because we've already discussed this multiple times in TTC, that's not like a new discussion.
We don't
so we can
really
just put
have-
it in the context of the referendum.
We don't really have anything. We don't really have anything public works related in here, but I would like to hear. I would like the Police and Fire Commission to have something to say about this too.
Why?
Do they
The
get
police and
things
fire,
referred?
that is another role.
Police and Fire Commission doesn't meet until August 21st. Again.
Well, that's before the 27th.
Yeah, that depends on what the council would
I
like for
think,
the referral.
I think we are, this is my concern. Tracy need to send the question on August 28. Okay, 29. And we are going to, if my concern is we're going to August 27 to vote and to still changing the language, we are not going to have enough time for her in the next morning to do this. So that one is my concern. This is what we need to, we already have been discussing this for a year, okay? So, and we already, we have this document with us for more than 3 months, okay? So I think we already know what we're going to do, some of us, I imagine. And this is my concern, is the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and we have gone a couple of months now with no progress on this. I mean, not any progress among the council, because we didn't talk about it in June, and now we're approaching the end of July. So we can complain about how much time is left now, but that's an administrative issue. We didn't have this discussion
I
sooner.
think we had
Hold
a
on, hold on.
discussion.
Are we just talking about the difference between voting on August 13th and voting on August 27th?
Yes.
Okay, but Tracy knows.
Tracy knows how
Tracy
to
knows
do
that
this.
we're going to do it the next days. I don't think that's not a
I
concern of
have
mine.
total confidence that our city clerk can get this out on the 28th.
No, I don't have
after
a question.
we
My
vote on
question is, the question is that, that is the night before, you know what I mean? That's it. If something happened or, we are still talking about some people now, they're saying, oh yeah, this is the language, this is where we want to go, but then in a month, some people can say, you know what? No, I don't want this language. I want to do that. So we have to have all these conversations that night. This is my concern.
I'm okay with having conversations about these things because this is important.
I know this is important, but we have been discussing this for a year already.
I would rather have more people providing input into this than just the 9 of us who sit up here.
My only question about the PFC is, do they ever vote on resolutions
What?
for the council? Is that even a thing that the PFC does?
No, they don't.
I think I'm not an attorney, and we can certainly consult with one, but I would be concerned that it's out of their scope of their statutory authority.
Yeah, no.
I appreciate the TTC. I think that's a good idea. I don't think the PFC is really, they don't recommend things they have their own authority separate from the council, which is why they exist.
They
so.
don't discuss this issue. They are only disciplinary.
Yeah, and we don't
Again,
even
I think it would
they
be
do.
important, as all of you have mentioned, to ensure that relevant committees or commissions are aware of the conversation and where things are heading, and that could certainly be an agenda discussion point for an update at the Police and Fire Commission.
Yeah, I agree.
But I
think-
would be concerned that if this council requested an actual action on a resolution by the PFC, that we'd be overstepping their statutory authority.
I agree. And those are the only two that I would think are relevant to this
can-
conversation, and TTC meets before the referral date. So I think you could refer it out on the 13th and vote on the 27th, but I don't know if I don't think it gets any necessarily committee referrals except maybe finance, but
Well, I think finance. I mean, if it's not going to go to PFC, that's fine. I mean, I just threw that out there as a possibility because they do deal with hiring and firing of
No,
officers.
Chad and I, we are going on the August 21st. We are gonna, maybe we can share
Sure,
with
we
them.
can
Okay.
also cover that in the
Yeah.
update that we're providing. One thing that's been brought to my attention too is if you do a committee or commission referral with the expectation of an action item, if they elect not to act, they have a total of 30 days to actually act before a council can vote on it. So if they were to postpone action, for instance, or not make a decision, they have 30 days to do so.
Council does have the authority to act on that anyway.
But
we have the ability to. There's a.
You have to wait
ordinance
30 days if
I think we
you have to give
shouldn't
them
risk.
30 days.
it just doesn't seem like there's any
No.
If they
point to
don't
doing
take
it.
any action, then once the 30 days is up, then you can do that. Do you have the ordinance number there by chance?
I just don't think it matters. I don't think we'd refer to them anyway. So
It's within
it's a moot
ordinance
point.
is where that lies.
I think it's gonna make sense that Bill and Gabriela can, share with the TTC committee and.
I feel like we could have a discussion item, not necessarily, because in order to have a referral out to us, we would have to do that like,
Yesterday.
On the
Yesterday,
on the
yeah.
13th.
well,
We could do it on the, oh, well,
No, because we-
yeah,
we
because
meet
your
on the
committee
8th.
meets before that.
yeah. So I think a discussion item on TTC, and maybe if the Commission on Aging meets before the next council meeting, they could discuss it as well, but it doesn't have to be a formal
referral.
resolution so much as an informational session, right?
That's fair enough. I just want to I want to make sure we have as many pieces of input into this as we can, because we collectively, as city leadership, are going to have to go out and sell this to the people.
And I think, it's, the educational campaign can certainly leverage the PFC and leverage TTC and leverage, the senior center, with regard to the paratransit, for instance. And so all of that education, there can be coordination amongst all of the committees and commissions, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So let me synthesize what I'm hearing. We're talking about referring out on August 13th to come back to council on August 27th, and only council, having potential discussion items.
Does anyone meet in those 2 weeks?
No, but I mean, I think the referral is it's an informational piece. Like, you refer it out so that it's in the public before you go to the vote.
What we can do is, if the council has a list of committees and commissions that they would prefer that this at least be a discussion item agended, we can work with the staff contacts for those to identify who are meeting prior to the August 27th council meeting, and direct them to at least include a discussion item on their respective committee or commission agendas.
Great.
And then ideally, we'll work with the alder who's on those particular committee and commissions to provide the update as to what that is. I think we need to rely on the alders if that's the wishes of the council.
And then I think the rest of the conversation revolved around, we talked about edits to the question that we'd like to see, plus I think, well, I said that I would like the 30, I guess me and Jay said 36 million, but no one else said a number, so.
How about 3.6?
3.6 million, not 36 million, 3.6. Oh, God.
Gabriela, we need to leave tonight with a number.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
3.6 is the only number that we're discussing
No one,
right now.
no one's brought up any objections, so it sounds like.
I don't think there's any other number on the table.
It's just that the 3.6 is at the nervous end of the spectrum. And so, the bigger the number we go for, the greater the chance that we get nothing instead of the whole thing. So I guess as long as we're prepared to come away with nothing.
Well, I think we have to be prepared to go out and sell this to the residents of the city.
Right.
That's our job. We have to go out there and make the case.
And there is a less than 100% chance we'll be successful. And
Well,
where that
there's-
number lies is anybody's guess. But
You know what? Even if we did 2.9 million, there's still a less than 100% chance that it passes. So, we can try to play a Vegas slot machine here, or we can just be confident that we can go and make this happen.
Yeah, and this is a crazy election. Like, we're going to have multiple referendums. City of Madison is doing a lot of communication about it already, which in some ways could be good because people are hearing about levy limits and referendums in the local media now because of Madison.
We know Madison is obviously likely to have a referendum. City of Monona is likely to have a referendum.
It's referendum season.
There's
plus,
definitely a handful just locally.
plus a totally jam-packed.
I think you may be correct. I think I may have heard that one out there too,
Yeah.
that they may be heading to referendum
There's just
also.
a ton of referendums, and then there's a ton on the ballot, so it's just going to be. I don't think there's any predicted. Even if it's not a lot of precedent for this type of thing, even compared to other things in the state. So,
And I think, I understand that your concern, because this is my concern too. This is the first time that we are doing this as a city, and we never expected that the Madison School District will come with that, obscene amount of money asking, you know what I mean? That one is a threat to our referendum. We have to be honest with that, you know what I mean? So I am concerned, yes, with the $600 million.
so would you prefer not to do it, or? I understand being concerned, but I was like, I guess the decision is like, do we do it or we don't do it? And
I think we need to. I think we need to do it because we need this to continue the growth, we are understaffed, you know what I mean? We need this, you know what I mean? But I think we need to make a difference because the city of Madison is doing the referendum for other reasons, totally different for the one that we are doing. And that one this is what we need to know the message, you know, that we need to say, because we are doing this because we are growing, we are understaffed, but we have our financial, you know, foundation is in good shape, you know what I mean? We don't have a deficit, you know, we are not even thinking to lay off people or cut services at this point. Even if the referendum doesn't pass, I don't think that we are going to reach at that point. We are going to be more kind of like, you know, status quo, you know what I mean? But, you know, so this is why I think it's important to, you know, to know what is the message that we're going to say to the people about why we are doing this. That we know, but we have to have a solid message that, I don't know. So I understand your concern, and believe me,
But you prefer,
no, I think
you want the 3.6? 3.6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with that number.
Jim, any?
I think we should go for the 3.6. I mean, we do have a staffing study, organizational study that we could say, hey, we went outside, you know, to actually evaluate ourselves. Outside agency evaluated us, and I mean, I think the positions are, you know, on point. I just get concerned about how it's going to be communicated, because it's not what you say, is what people hear.
Exactly.
And it's going to be very, very important that the message is very concise, succinct, and that we're all on the same page, saying the same message.
And I'd like to be sure that we have some kind of narrative that supports the three, what did we call them?
Additional city staff.
The three additional.
We'll certainly have that, and Anna's been working on updating the question based upon the feedback, so we thought it'd be important for you guys to see that here tonight, so you can take a look at what your edits look like currently, and if you'd like to make any further modifications to those edits.
And while we're doing that, any objections to 3.6 from Donald or Joe or Bill? I see no's.
Looks like we're all in.
3.6 works for me.
Okay.
And we know what are the other city operating costs. Okay. Yeah, I think it looks fine.
That is the most amazing question I've ever seen.
Is it?
Bonus points if you can read it in one breath.
The only problem is that the word ongoing police service, I don't know what the word
Where
ongoing
is
needs
that?
to be there. Ongoing police services building operating costs, isn't it just the?
No, I think it's part of the language,
Police
isn't it?
services building operating costs would be adequate.
I think
I just don't think you need the word ongoing.
no, but I think it's part of the language because we need to say it, Gabriela, because
Well,
I
then
think
we
it's
would,
assumed by
then
the
we would,
fact that the referendum is recurring is what
yeah,
you're
exactly.
getting
It's
at.
recurring.
Yeah.
It's not one time.
Yeah.
You need to differentiate that this is no one-time thing. It's
yeah,
gonna
that's
be
down
ongoing.
at the bottom of this long question.
Yeah, we need to keep.
That's why you have to read all 700 of those words.
Yeah, that's what we didn't want to.
Yeah, it's
Well, no, but I just don't think you need it in that word. I think.
It's pretty consistent what I'm looking at all the other spring elections or referendums, and that wording is pretty consistent with all of them.
Yeah, we need to see ongoing basis because it means that is.
No, I ongoing basis at the end. Yeah, I just didn't want the word ongoing with the police services building.
I don't, where?
There was another ongoing earlier in the,
Oh,
in the
I
question.
didn't see it. Maybe it was there. Oh, okay.
Having the word ongoing
Okay.
once in that
Oh,
sentence
okay, I
is
didn't see
enough.
that. Okay.
One time.
Yeah, okay. It's assumed that it's ongoing.
Any other comments?
So just to confirm, you guys are comfortable with this question, that we should then now get fully vetted with Ellers and the DOA?
Yes.
DOR, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I see lots
Just
of nodding heads.
in an effort to be efficient with the wording, where it says in the center of that, where it says for the next fiscal year 2025, can we just say for fiscal year 2025 and get rid of a few of those words?
No.
Oh, it is. Well, I guess some statutes haven't been updated since 1868.
All right. Do you have what you need?
So right now, just to confirm, the council is good on the question that Adam has up. We'll work to get that vetted. I don't anticipate that we're going to have much for problems there. Can I grab that back from you? Oh, you got it? Yeah, perfect. So we're looking at, do you mind putting up the $25 a month slide? With the 3 point, I can tell you, got it there? Yep. So we will focus our efforts on what's listed in the $25 a month slide unless you want any modifications made to that to change the makeup of the 3.6.
Seeing no comments. Any, Jay?
Yeah, in the question, we don't have anything about the paid-on-call increase.
Oh, yeah.
That's considered the operating cost.
Operating cost,
And we will
okay,
do
then.
the education and outreach to
Okay,
confirm
okay.
that folks are aware that that's part of it.
Okay, that one's good.
Do we know how much that is of this chunk of money?
I can tell you in a second.
It's part of the public safety.
Yeah, we do have it to a certain extent. What do you need me to do?
I think it's $3 more per, but I don't know, multiplied by,
Yeah, we were able to finalize that estimate as well, so Adam will dig that up. She might know it off the top of her head.
Do we need that right now? Can we look at that?
Well, I just want to know where it falls in the list of, because if that's in the $300,000 range, I would prefer that we call it out in the question.
Approximately $140,000.
Okay, that's fine then. We can just.
$141,000.
That's
Been
fine.
corrected.
Okay.
So 3.6 million with the items that are listed on the slide that Adam had up. 3 police officers, 1 police lieutenant, 1 sergeant for investigations, 6 firefighters, a paid on-call firefighter rate increase, communication director, HR position, finance position, transit improvements, police services building operating costs, and general city operating costs.
Yeah, I have a question. What is
And
HR?
partridge in a pear tree.
What?
And a partridge in a pear tree.
I caught it there at the end, yeah.
What is the business partner? What does it mean that?
That's simply job title at this point, working job title.
Oh, okay.
So, yep, that's exactly all it is.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no objections, I'm going to move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you very much for the conversation and the direction provided. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Next agenda item announcements. Next committee of the whole meeting will be August 28th, 2024. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:48 p.m. Thank you.